Hi everyone, and welcome to Deep Geek Live. Today we have an open Q&A. Only 3 days until House of the Dragon, 2 weeks until the Rings of Power. So I just thought another chance just for any random questions we've got about either of those things or anything else I cover, really. Books for Fire and Blood, A Song of Ice and Fire, any of the Lord of the Rings stuff. Feel free to throw some questions. I will, as always, frame this around some questions from my patrons, but I will try and dig into as many questions as I possibly can from the chat as we are going through. By way of updates of what's going on this week, there's just the usual deluge of new trailers, teaser trailers, articles, interviews, promo pictures from both House of the Dragon and the Rings of Power. It is quite hard to keep up, but there is a lot of new stuff out there. We'll probably talk about a bit of that as we go through the live stream. I think the only thing in terms that was probably worth bringing everyone's attention to is they've announced the release schedule for the Rings of Power. I'm not going to go through it all in detail here. If you're interested in that, if you go to Twitter, find Deep Geek, just scroll back a little bit, you'll find that I retweeted that. But basically, 8 episodes. The first 2 episodes will be released on week 1. So we're going to get 2 episodes dropped at the same time. And that will be overnight for me anyway, Thursdays into Friday. The first one is going to be at 9 p.m. Eastern time, and then after that it's going to go to, I think, midnight. I'm not entirely sure why the first week is slightly different to later weeks. Might be something as basic as bandwidth. I think they're expecting a huge amount of people to be trying to watch those first couple of episodes when they first come out. But that's where we're at. House of the Dragon starts 3 days' time. I saw someone in the chat, apologies, I didn't quite catch your name as it was going through, asking how I am going to be covering House of the Dragon, whether I'm going to be doing any pre-post show live streams. This is what my plan is. House of the Dragon will come out Sunday night to Monday morning, depending on where you are in the world. It's at 9 p.m. Eastern time, which is 2 a.m. UK time. I will be doing, on the Sunday, I will be doing a pre-show, the same as I've done previous seasons of Game of Thrones, Westworld and the like. I'll be doing a pre-show live stream at 5 p.m. Eastern time. So that's a little bit before the show airs, just to go through what happened in the previous episode, what might happen in the episode coming up. I'm hoping to, I've not invited anyone yet, but I'm hoping to have some special guests on for those. So if there's anyone in particular you think that I should be inviting, who you think would be excellent as a guest, then do let me know in the comments section. I'll probably shoot out a few emails to people tomorrow or something like that. But anyway, pre-show live stream, 5 p.m. Eastern time on the Sunday. The next day, I will be doing an episode breakdown video. I'm not going to do any post-show live streams for the simple reason that that's 3 a.m. my time, and I think trying to do that over the course of 10 weeks, as well as covering this and the Rings of Power, will probably do me in. So I'm not going to be doing any post-show live streams. I'm very happy to be pointing people at post-show live streams. If you find a post-show live stream, instant reaction type stuff that you think it's the kind of thing that I'd wish to point people towards, then please do let me know. I'm very happy to be sharing the love, pointing people in other places. But I will be doing an episode breakdown within 24 hours of the episode ending. The next day, on the Tuesday, I aim to, if they're going to do one of those like mini trailers coming up next time kind of thing, I will do a short breakdown video of that. And then on the Wednesday, if there's an issue that's come up during the week in that episode, if there's something everyone's talking about, then I will try and do a video on that for sort of an explanation of what's going on, what the implications of something might be, that kind of thing. There usually is when you have a TV show like this, particularly with House of the Dragon. I know George R. R. Martin is keen, and the showrunners are keen for us to be kept on our toes here, not just a straightforward adaptation, but a few little extra details added in here and there. So I'll be doing breakdown and explanation videos midweek as well. I'll talk more about the Rings of Power when we get a little bit closer to that, but basically it's going to be the same idea, but over when they come out, which is Thursday night to Friday morning, depending on where you are in the world. So that's what my schedule is. I'm hoping to be able to get into quite a rhythm with this. You should see content from me coming out, if not every day, then close to every day. So that's the plan. I've been building up for this. I'm very excited. I hope you're very excited. That's what you can expect from In Deep Geek over the course of the next few weeks. But let's get into the questions. This is going to dot about, I think, between House of the Dragon and the Rings of Power. And there will be a few other random questions as well towards the end. So let's get into our question here from Ubermelon saying, "Hi Robert, hope you are well." I am, thank you. How does King's Blood work? Would Maester Aemon still have King's Blood? What about Bloodraven? Can you lose King's Blood? Okay, so this is an interesting question. This is a concept which obviously came up in Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire. Melisandre talks about it quite a lot. Others do as well. The idea that there is magic in King's Blood. This, how exactly it works, George R. R. Martin hasn't given us like this clear breakdown of it. This is exactly how magic works, but there do appear to be some principles involved in magic. And at some point I will do my long promise. It's probably about 3 years that I've said I will at some point. I will get my head around doing a full "How does magic work in the world of Ice and Fire" video. But there are some clear principles. One of the principles is intention. You have to be intending to do the magic. Magic just doesn't tend to just randomly happen around you. There has to be some sort of intention. Secondly, there has to be some degree of sacrifice. Magic doesn't come for free. And with sacrifice, then the bigger the sacrifice, the bigger the magic. So King's Blood is a very big sacrifice. Kings are rare, and they are precious, and so King's Blood is incredibly important. So that counts as a big sacrifice, allowing you to do big magic. Now, this will have a lot of implications in the story of A Song of Ice and Fire. Obviously, we've already seen Melisandre with Edric Storm. The extent to which that was the King's Blood working, bring about the deaths of those 3 kings, is debatable, but clearly the principle was established. The Shireen death apparently is going to be happening. We now have to, I think, as a complete digression, we have to put a little asterisk now against most of the things George R. R. Martin has said as sort of hints or guarantees in the past about what's happening in the future of Game of Thrones, because he's emphasized so strongly over the last few weeks and months how he has changed his mind a lot. He has the writing has moved in new directions, and it is getting further and further away from what we saw in the TV show. So we have to take some of the things that he said in the past with a pinch of salt. But what we previously were told was that one of the things which will definitely happen is Shireen's killing. Shireen being burned by Melisandre, and the clear implication is that this is, or in the show, this was in order to make the weather better so that Stannis could survive and attack Winterfell. Now, in the books, that will be a lot more. That felt a little bit underwhelming, to be honest, in the TV show. In the books, the weather is horrendous. They are already they're eating their horses. People are dying. The snowdrifts are tens, dozens of feet high. This is bad. You literally cannot get across the north anymore, the northern parts. So if you want any characters moving anywhere, you have to have this magic happening. So I think that is now largely baked in. But anyway, that's going to be one. And the other interesting thing is Euron. Euron, in the pre-release chapter from the Winds of Winter, the Aegon chapter, that we see at the very end of that, he has strapped or lashed his lover, Falia Flowers, pregnant lover, Falia Flowers, to the prow of one of his boats. That's his child that she is carrying. So that is King's blood, because let's not forget, Euron is the king of the Iron Islands, legitimate king by their own rules. He was voted in. He's as close as there is to a democratic leader, bizarrely, as close as there is to a democratic leader in the Seven Kingdoms, if you ignore places like the Night's Watch. And he is therefore trying to do some magic, and that will be powerful magic with King's blood. So it's never written down as a very clear and strong magic system, but there are some principles that are clearly there that George R. Martin has established, and sacrifice is one. So King's blood is a big sacrifice. So that's what's going on there. Had another question from Roman Lakovets saying, George R. Martin recently said that not one but several Targaryen kings thought that the Long Night would happen during their lifetime, and he laid groundwork for it in both in the books and in House of the Dragon. Your thoughts? Okay, so this is the Vanity Fair article which came out a few days ago, and this is definitely worth thinking about. I addressed this a week or two ago when we had kind of hints of this, but now this is clearly out in the open. This is something George R. Martin has talked about. So it's clear that he has said that he is tying together all of this Targaryen prophecies and dreams. He's saying this isn't just a made up for the show kind of thing. He is saying that he is tying this all together. Daenerys the Dreamer, they are escaping from the doom of Valyria. But then we also get many other Targaryens who have dreams, who have visions. All of this is tied in all the right way down to the Prince that was promised prophecy with Rhaegar, with this idea of preparing the Seven Nations for an attack from the others. Now, we do not yet know the details of this, so I'm still slightly hedging my words here, because until we know the exact details of this does come from George R. R. Martin, though, it's quite hard to say exactly what it is. But clearly he is retrofitting to a certain degree, I think. I might be wrong. He could have had this planned right from the very beginning. But this idea that we have the Targaryens are there on a mission. Regardless of whether this was planned from the beginning or something he's thought of later, he is a Gardner writer. He does think of things as he goes along. Regardless of how it came about, this is going to be spelled out explicitly in House of the Dragon. He has made very clear, and he has said that he's hinted at it in World of Ice and Fire, in A Song of Ice and Fire, and in the Duncan stories. So it's there. He has set it up. So this isn't new. The Targaryens have always been playing with prophecy. What is new is the fact that these prophecies, these dreams, are connected. And the connection is this threat to the Seven Kingdoms from the others. So that is the new thing we've got going on here. Question Shambits Gaming saying, oh, no question. Love your content, my guy. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Joe Magician's in the chat. Hi there, Matt. I highly recommend you go and check out Joe Magician's channel, who has talked about this issue. And I think I'm right in saying that Matt was one of the people who's been talking about this idea of the Targaryens having invaded Westeros on a mission, really, based on their dreams and visions to unite the Seven Kingdoms and defend it from the others. So I think that Matt, Joe Magician, is ahead of the game on this one, and I'm pretty sure he's done a video on it. If one of the moderators wants to put a link across there, then that would be fantastic if anyone wants to follow up on that. But yeah, do check out the channel. I know that he will be covering House of the Dragon, so do go and check him out. But anyway, Matt is saying George's approach to how magic works is either A, psychic powers, or B, I don't know, sounds cool, don't think too hard about it because I didn't. Well, yeah, he does sometimes use the it's all magic in it, don't think about it answer. The Sphinx asking if I'm covering Sandman. I did one video, an introduction to the Sandman. I knew this was all happening at the same time, and seriously trying to cover 3 things at the same time would kill me. So I've not covered the Sandman. I've done an introductory video. I'm really enjoying it. I'm taking my time going through that the show, but it is really good. If you like the original, or even if you've never even come across the original Sandman, it's excellent. So please do go check that out. It's on Netflix. I had another question somewhere. Philip saying, when Robert takes his glasses off, you know he's serious. And that's the truth. Question here from Alan Simpson saying, have you read the fragment of The Lost Road, Tolkien's brief foray into speculative fiction? Imagine a world where he did not abandon that to write Lord of the Rings, tying the elder days and Numenor to real history. Yes, a long time ago. So this is Tolkien. I will use this, if you don't mind, I will use this as a sort of a primer for how Tolkien wrote and developed his work, because I think a lot of people, particularly if you're new to Tolkien, or if you've only ever watched the films or read the main books, the Lord of the Rings, often have the feeling that Tolkien just wrote this perfect set of stories and ended it, and that was it, and you can't touch that, and there's nothing else. And undeniably, The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit is perfect and beautiful and wonderful. However, Tolkien's writing process was a decades-long one that he never stopped writing. He never stopped changing the background, the history to what he was doing. I'm doing at the moment. I'm doing a video. I'm writing one about Celeborn, Galadriel's husband, and I always come back to there's this fantastic sentence where Christopher Tolkien, who was J.R.R. Tolkien's son and the person who knew his work better than anyone else, he edited and effectively sort of ghost wrote parts of the Silmarillion. So he knows J.R.R. Tolkien's work better than anyone else. And he says there is no part in the history of Middle-earth that is more and I can't remember the exact word he uses, but has more problems than Celeborn and Galadriel, the history of Celeborn and Galadriel, because for both of them, Tolkien wrote so many different versions of their histories, and it's really hard trying to pick out which of these is the right history. And this goes for so much of what he's done. The Balrogs as a concept changed during his time writing. If you look at the Silmarillion, you'll find legions, hundreds of Balrogs all over the place. Towards the end, by the time he's writing The Lord of the Rings and later, he's saying, well, yeah, there probably were only 7 or maybe only 3 in total. And you have to go, okay, so that was a change. And then what the Balrogs even were, he changed his mind on over time. So how he viewed and how he wrote also shifted, and he came towards this conceit, writing conceit, that's meant in the proper sense of the word, not a sort of disparaging sense, that he was this kind of academic who was uncovering these stories from Earth's ancient history or a different phase. That he always said this isn't the Earth in a different part of its time, it was Earth in a different stage of imagination. So that was the idea, and he created this character for himself as someone who was discovering these stories, to the extent that when somebody would write him a letter, he quite often would write back with this kind of professorial hat on and saying, yes, I was wondering about that question too. As best as I can figure out what was happening was that, and it's like he's also trying to understand what's going on there. So I like where he ended up with writing The Lord of the Rings and creating this meta structure of himself discovering things, because it allows for a much more fluid world. But it did make it quite hard for people like Christopher Tolkien to pull things together later, because there were so many different versions of so many different of these stories. Let's go to a question from Adam O'Toole saying, "Howdy, Robert. My first ever super chat." Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Wanted your thoughts on the genetic tampering of old Valyria on the Targaryen colouring and dragon style. The genetic tampering of old Valyria on the Targaryen colouring and dragon style. Right. So I've got a question a little bit later about ethnicity of Valyrians, if that's what you're asking about there. I will come to that. I will address that bit a little bit later, if that's okay. In terms of the genetic tampering, I'm fully signed up to this idea that the Targaryens, or the Valyrians in old Valyria, they have a little bit of, the Dragon Riders have a little bit of dragon DNA inside them in some magical way, which actually makes them literally part dragon. Now, the best explanation of all of that was a video by Amanda, the Disputed Lands. I don't know whether any of the moderators will be able to find that and link across, but she did an excellent couple of videos just going through all of the evidence for why this is. But I fully buy into this idea that there is a genetic link between dragons and the Dragon Riders. And when I say the Dragon Riders, therefore the Targaryens are the only remaining Dragon Riders, so they're the only people with this draconic DNA within them. Now, how does that therefore affect the dragons? Because then all of the dragons seem to be slightly different in colouring, and George R. R. Martin was very clear on this. He said there were 3 things that he wanted House of the Dragon to have. One of them, which was on face value quite bizarre request about Jaehaerys II that I covered last week, if you're interested. But also he was very clear he wanted the dragons to appear different and have different colours, which was very important to him. I think we will get a whole lot more information about dragons. The showrunners have thought a lot about them. Again, one of the other interviews, articles with them in the last couple of weeks has been them talking a lot about the nature of dragons and how that works. What is very clear to me is that the dragons that came across from Valyria, there were 5, and within those 5, 4 of which had died out before they then on Dragonstone, before the Targaryens moved across into Westeros. They within them had the potential for dragons of different colours and perhaps potentially even different types, although that's something that House of the Dragon is looking to explore, but George R. R. Martin hasn't so much in the books. So hopefully that sort of rambling, talking around it is the answer. In terms of the colouring, I will pick up on that one a little bit later, if that's okay. Question from, where did I get up to? Chris K. NFL saying, "Good evening. Probably the wrong space, but Westworld creators, thoughts on the Fallout TV show? Some set pictures have been leaked and it looks great." I've not really looked at that, I have to say. So the Fallout TV show, I know it's something. I mean, I know I've heard of this. The Last of Us is looking good. I'd be very happy if you're watching this live in the chat. If you know more than I do, by all means, drop it in there. I'm not going to pretend I know more than I do on this one. What I'm definitely looking to do once I've got past this period of focusing on House of the Dragon and the Rings of Power is to have a wider look. What else is there out there that perhaps I could be covering on this channel? So I will be having a look, and thank you for bringing that to my attention. I will definitely be having a look. Catherine Furseth, thank you very much, saying, it does seem slightly strange, though, that Targaryens who were from Essos would feel the need to follow dreams or prophecies telling them to save Westeros. Doesn't seem logical somehow. Is this a Messiah complex? Well, again, this is where the detail, we haven't yet got the detail. So I'm hedging what I say a little bit here. What I think seems to be the implication of what's happened is that Daenerys the Dreamer had these visions about the doom of Valyria hundreds of years ago. The Targaryens believed her, up sticks, went to Dragonstone. That's that bit fine. Maybe she had a little bit extra there about, and there'll be some great thing that you need to do to save the world. I don't know. But the bit of the vision that they were following at that point was about leaving Valyria. If she were then proven right, the extra bit tagged on about and Westeros, you'll need to go and save Westeros or something, would add a little bit extra to it. But there is this 100-year gap. The Targaryens go to Dragonstone and they stay there for 100 years until Aegon decides to invade. Now, to my mind, what that's sort of feels like, because they could invade, they've got dragons, they could do it, they could take over anywhere they wanted to. To my mind, that is Aegon himself then got something that pushed him to launch the invasion. The people in between didn't. They were happy staying there. We know that there is the Valyrians had this kind of antipathy towards Westeros. There were visions there or prophecies there already that, for example, the doom of Valyria would be caused by Lannister gold. That's something that comes up in the World of Ice and Fire. If you're interested in my very long, but I still hold to it, explanation of how that all works and who caused the doom of Valyria many years ago, I did a video on that. But I think it seems they came across with the Dreamers' visions. They stayed there because they still had this inbuilt fear of Westeros, and then Aegon the Conqueror had this extra vision which brought them over into Westeros. That seems to be, for me, the iteration of it. But Messiah complex, yes, absolutely 100%. With the Messiah, even if we get this, and it seems that we get this new look at House Targaryen, that they're not just there being these evil conquerors wanting to take things over and have power for themselves. They actually genuinely think that they've got a role here to save humanity in some way. Even if we accept that, they still have this Targaryens are closer to gods than men attitude, which is a little bit of a Messiah complex. And if you take Rhaegar as just a classic example, he thought, I'm the prince that was promised. I'm the person who's going to save Westeros. And it turned out it wasn't him. And then he decided it was his son. My son is the person who's going to save Westeros. And it turned out it wasn't him. This Messiah complex is still there, regardless of whether they're right. So this will be a shift, a nuance in our understanding of how House Targaryen, or what House Targaryen are up to and their motivations as a whole, but it doesn't get rid of their superiority complex. Let's go to Stringer Studio saying, can you tell us what other stories from Fire and Blood besides the dance will make it to House of the Dragon? I can't. They haven't said anything, but the mood music coming out from the showrunners is that House of the Dragon is going to be the banner for a lot of different stories about the Targaryens. So we've got lots of other shows which are not about the Targaryens, but the stories about the Targaryens will be done under the banner of House of the Dragon as a kind of an anthology show. So we will have the Dance of the Dragons, and then they will do other stories. Now, on the reasonable assumption that George R. R. Martin won't have written Fire and Blood Part 2 by the time that we've got to the end of the Dance of the Dragons, then they will have to find some other stories from Fire and Blood Part 1. The most obvious one is Aegon's invasion, to be honest. It's sort of crying out. Jaehaerys, his reign is long and has lots of interesting things in it, but it's not the most action-packed. It hasn't got a clear arc as a thing Maegor the Cruel could do. That would be quite a dark one. I would love to see the Regency, but those are the obvious things that they could do, and the most obvious is Aegon's conquest, but they haven't announced anything. Eric Harker saying, hello, Maester Robert. Who do you have in the battle between Dovahkiin versus Balerion the Black Dread? As always, your content is top notch. I don't know, to be honest. I'm having a mind blank on Dovahkiin. Balerion the Black Dread, though, is the biggest and most impressive dragon in all Westeros history. So that is quite an important point there. Cloaked One pointing out, saying, I watch Voice of Geekdom, Clueless Fangirl, and Girl Next Gondor. Yeah, all come highly recommended that for content with more of a Lord of the Rings focus. And all have been guests on this show. Philip saying, would House of the Dragon have to cover the Blackfire Rebellion before a Duncan Egg show is made to not kill the suspense if or when that rebellion is done? I don't think so. I don't think that's the way that they will have to do it. The fact that they, I would view this, and I don't take this too literally, please, but in the same way that we have the Star Wars expanded universe, this is how this is going to work out. So they don't worry with Star Wars. They don't worry about doing stories sort of halfway through the timeline. This story is somewhere between, Star Wars Episode 3 and Star Wars Episode 4, or this one is just after Star Wars Episode 6. They don't worry about that, the fact that we know what happens later. And I don't think they will worry about it here. They will assume that the geeks will know what happens and the non-geeks won't know what happens, and that's okay. I think that's the approach that they're going to take. That's certainly what's happened here with the Dance of the Dragons. We know the story. We know what's going to happen. They've been quite open. Yes, this is all about a civil war, but they're not giving out huge amounts of details. And there will be some little things here or there which will catch us by surprise, which will be things that they're dropping in that George R. R. Martin has ticked and said, yeah, okay, that's fine. That's all right as added information or a move away from what he has written. I think that might be me caught up now in the chat, so I will go to a question. Lady Pushkin's quick question from one of my patrons saying, in the House of the Dragon trailer, who is the guy with the eye patch, please? Hope you're well. Is it Alicent's son? Yes, so that is Aemond Targaryen. So they've not focused much on him in the pre-publicity, probably because Season 1 is going to cover a large time scale. There is, from the Great Council of 101 is where the opening scene, and the Dance of the Dragons is in 129. So we've got 28 years in total here. So expect time jumps. Now, Aemond was not even born at that early point. He's not going to appear until a few episodes into the season. So they have not really introduced him, but he is a very important character when we get into the dance itself. So he's the Alicent's second son. She's got Aegon here. He's the king candidate, Aegon the second. His brother is Aemond. Now, Aemond will be the driving force for Team Green for large swathes of this battle, for this civil war. So keep an eye out for him. He's he will appear in season 1, but really it's later seasons when he's going to start getting to be really quite significant. Vibo saying, hi Robert, looking forward to all of your coverage. Thank you. When do you think we'll hear more about the other A Song of Ice and Fire TV projects and House of the Dragon's renewal for more seasons? Any you are really keen to get the green light? Also, are there any possible A Song of Ice and Fire spin-off ideas that you think might work as standalone movies rather than a TV series? I'd love to see Westeros at cinema scale and budgets, but I don't know how compatible that would be with the world George R. R. Martin has created. Well, I'll quickly go through those questions. In terms of when we might hear about House of the Dragon renewal, I think we will hear about it within the next couple of weeks. I genuinely do. They, HBO, that is, tend not to make an announcement about renewal of a TV show until that season has started airing. Now, they've given heavy hints that they're going to renew it. Everything is suggesting that this is going to be a big hit. It's got momentum. It's got everybody excited. It's the top of when IGN did their most anticipated TV shows of the year. It came top of that. All of the reviews, literally all of the reviews, have been positive for it. I see absolutely no reason why this is not going to be a hit. So they will make a decision and they will make the announcement very soon, I think. Maybe even after the first episode, but certainly within the first couple of weeks. They may, if they're going to be playing games with Amazon, they may wish to do it close to the start of Rings of Power so that they can just sort of throw down the gauntlet and say, our show is a massive success. We're renewing it straight away for the second season. Filming starts on such and such time. Over to you. That is what is likely. So at some point in the next couple of weeks. The other shows, well, we don't know because they will not greenlight them until they've reached the right point. But they, I think, are very clearly holding back on all of this until they know that House of the Dragon is going to be a success. If it were to fail, if it were to fall on its face, then not many of them would be going forward. If it's a huge success, suddenly this is their cash cow going forward. They can make lots of spin-offs from Game of Thrones, from House of the Dragon, and lots of things will be given the green light. In my wildest dreams, what we're going to see is something equivalent to, and I can't remember whether it happened exactly like this, but this is how I remember it. At the end of Mandalorian season 1, once they knew this was a success, then they just came out with that board saying, coming soon, all these extra Star Wars things, Obi-Wan, Ahsoka, Bad Batch, and just rattling through all of these different new Star Wars things that they just greenlit them all and said, right, they're going to happen. So that, in my mind, that would be how it was. I don't think they will do it quite like that. But do not be surprised if at some point in the near future, a few of these get greenlit. Whether that's the thing I'm interested in is whether that is going to be greenlit for pilot, which was the old HBO way of doing things, or greenlit straight to series. The House of the Dragon was greenlit straight to series. But before that, generally speaking, HBO's way of doing things was getting pilots and then deciding whether to go ahead based on the pilot. I think that they're moving more towards greenlighting straight to series. Of the things that are out there, from what I've heard in terms of where they've got to, when you start reading between the lines of what George R. R. Martin has said, what we've heard from various other people, the ones that are most advanced seem to be the 9 Voyages, the Corlys Velaryon one, the Nymeria one, 10,000 ships, and possibly 1 or 2 of the animes, the Yeti one. The others, it feels like they've still got a little bit more to go. I would love Duncan Egg next. I don't know if that will be the next one to get announced. It would not surprise me if Corlys Velaryon is a big success within the show. Then I think that they will probably green light that one. In terms of spin-off ideas that might work as standalone movies. I think this is I find this fascinating because do they actually now care about movies so much? The big bucks for them are in TV shows. The talent goes to TV shows, and the money that they're spending on these shows nowadays, I can't remember the budget for House of the Dragon, but it is huge, and it is actually not lagging that much behind a big Hollywood blockbuster. But what is it that could work within George R. R. Martin's world for a movie? My instinct is that most of it, he paints on a large canvas. Most of it works best as long form, as TV shows. The Duncan Egg stories, I know that they're wanting to do them as series, as a show for each Duncan Egg story. The idea at the moment is that they turn that into a season. I still like the idea of, for those who remember Sherlock on the BBC a few years ago, the Benedict Cumberbatch, Martin Freeman one, that they did feature length, that they weren't sticking to a specific length. It was sort of hour, anywhere between an hour and 2 hours. So it's basically film length, but made for TV. And they just made as many as they wanted to each season. So it was like 2-3 episodes. That, for me, works well for something like Duncan Egg. Very kind of episodic, but linked at a high level. The other thing that I would love to see that could work at that kind of level is the Tourney at Harrenhal. Everything's gone quiet on this, which is making me slightly nervous, because this was the thing I was most excited about when I heard about it. They are making a stage play of the Tourney at Harrenhal. George R. Martin is involved. As far as I understand, it's not a musical, it's like a proper play. And that I last heard from about 18 months, 2 years ago, nothing since. They were talking about maybe it be ready in 2023. That now seems quite ambitious, given that we've not had any update at all. Yes, we had some initial names attached to it, but you would have thought that they would start moving towards who is it that we might, have we finished writing it? Who might we start thinking about casting in this? That kind of thing. So if they can come up with a script that works effectively over, I mean, I don't know, you can make a stage play 3 hours. Even the Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, they broke down into 2, so that was 2 stage plays that you watched part 1 and then went away and had some dinner and came back for part 2. But if they could make that film length, that would be quite a task doing that. But if they could, I would love to see that, rather than just like a one-off TV series. Think Andrew Kay saying, not sure in Deep Geek, but could George R. R. Martin want to reveal certain things in The Winds of Winter that hopefully is not too far away before the stage play? Yes. I mean, this was my general hope, was that he was going to finish The Winds of Winter and then the stage play would come out. And I would agree that he probably would want to do, but I don't know. The Winds of Winter, I've given up guessing when Winds of Winter is going to come out. He does. I mean, for those who missed it, there was an update from him, maybe in this last week, I can't remember. He said that he has now, or he was hoping this week, to finish off one character's arc within The Winds of Winter, and possibly 2. Now, that was very encouraging, because he'd already said a little bit before that he was close to the end of Tyrion. He only had one more Tyrion chapter to go. So it makes sense if that character that he was talking about was Tyrion. If Tyrion is finished, that actually is really significant, because he is central to a whole load of other POV characters and their storylines. If he's finished Tyrion, that means that he knows at least in outline what is happening with Barristan Selmy. He knows at least in outline what is happening with Victarion, and crucially, he knows at least in outline what is happening with Daenerys, because all of that group of people will be together in some way. So if he's reached the end of Tyrion's story and he's hoping that he might be able to reach the end of another person, it's entirely possible that the other person is, say, someone like Sir Barristan. And that then almost locks down that part of the story, because he's got a few chunks. This could be quite a long digression, but he's got a few different chunks of story that he has to do, which have got things connected into them. So one of them is this bit over there. One of them is Sansa. At the moment, that's relatively self-contained, but she may end up going up to the north, say. Arya is relatively self-contained, but she may well end up coming back to Westeros. He's got a chunk down in the southwest with Sam and with Aeron. He's got a chunk up at the wall and around Winterfell that he needs to be dealing with, and he's got two massive, lots of interconnected strands, one around King's Landing, Dawn, Aegon's invasion, and the other one about what's happening in the Riverlands. So what is encouraging is if he manages to lock down some of these. He said that he had finished a clutch of Cersei chapters, which is very encouraging. That means that he knows roughly what's happening now in the King's Landing theatre, because everything that happens around there with Aegon will play into Cersei's chapters, and also the Dornish plot line will also play into that, because they're sending emissaries up into King's Landing, so that all has to tie in together. If he's got the Tyrion bit sorted, I imagine that the Sansa and the Arya ones are slightly more straightforward because they've got fewer moving parts. This means that he's making very good progress, and all of the mood music is positive. He's being a lot more chatty. He's talking about this a lot more. He's speculating on how long the book's going to be. He's thinking about how people will react when they get it. All of this is very positive. And incidentally, it might even be today, could even be now for all I know. History of Westeros, fantastic channel, podcast, collaborators with me as well. A lot of the recent A Song of Ice and Fire content has been collaborations with History of Westeros. They are interviewing George R.R. Martin, I think, today. That will be absolutely fascinating to see what he says there. I know that they've got some great questions lined up for that. So do keep an eye out for what comes out from that. You can believe me, I will be trying to get all of the gossip out of Aziz. I'm sure he's expecting that from lots of people, but I'd love to hear what he can get out from the big man himself. Connor Cunningham, what are the chances of Blackfire-based show? So this is entirely possible if we have got this anthology approach with House of the Dragon. Then the Blackfire rebellions, or what happens with the Great Bastards, being Bloodraven, Aegor Rivers, Shirasi Star, Daemon Blackfire, what happens with them is probably the standout idea for a story from the second half of Fire and Blood when that gets published. But I am absolutely convinced that they will wait until George R.R. Martin has done Fire and Blood Part 2 before they start tackling those stories. They're going to go back in time to do things that have already been covered in Fire and Blood Part 1. So yes, that's a definite once Fire and Blood Part 2 happens. My instinct, he's not said this, but my instinct is that the order in which things will emerge from George R.R. Martin in terms of books is going to be The Winds of Winter will be the next published thing we get from him. Then I think we're going to get a Duncan Egg novella. Then I think that he finds writing Fire and Blood, it's very clear, easy and fun. It would not surprise me if that happens next. And then we'll get a Dream of Spring. He'll probably be working on a Dream of Spring in the background, but I think that we will get Fire and Blood Part 2 once we've got, within a year or two of the Winds of Winter. I'm just not predicting when the Winds of Winter is going to happen. The Sphinx saying, do you think you'll cover Dune in the future, or is that too sci-fi? Dune, interestingly, is one of those... I love the books. I really do. It's been a long time since I've read them. I feel like I'd give the same answer to this, which at some point will change, because I am going to reread the books. But it's been a while since I've read them, and I don't want to do anything which is not up to my usual standards. So at the moment, no. Dune is one of those interesting sci-fi stories that actually, when you start getting into it, yes, it's sci-fi, but it's close to kind of science fantasy. Maybe I will at some point. So I'm dangling a little bit of hope for you there that I will. Not within the next 6 months to a year, definitely. And I'm going to, as I always do over Christmas time, I will stop and I'll have a think, take some time off and think about what the future is for the channel, what else I might be covering in the future. So yes, it's certainly something I enjoy, and I could well do that. Joe Magician, update from Aziz saying, yes, they've already finished their interview with George R.R. Martin, about an hour and a half, I believe. Well, I know what I'm doing after I finish doing this live stream. I'm getting straight onto Aziz and trying to get all the gossip. Antonio Christian Simescu, thank you very much. I didn't see a question attached to that one. If you do have one, I'm sure one of the moderators will pick it up and try and draw it to my attention. Callie Summers saying, will we see dragons in the Second Age Rings of Power? Okay, so we're moving over to the Lord of the Rings for this question. In the Rings of Power, they were around and claiming dwarven hordes, but only a mention in the text until Smaug took Erebor. Okay, so dragons. Dragons were devised in the First Age by Morgoth, who is the big baddie. In Tolkien's Legendarium, he was Sauron's boss. The end of the First Age, Morgoth gets defeated, chained, cast into the abyss. His army is destroyed and scattered. There are just a few remnants left. Now, the thing which a lot of this is going to focus on in the Rings of Power is, where is Sauron? Sauron goes missing. He was Morgoth's chief lieutenant. For a moment, he seemed to be looking like he was going to give up and repent, but then he just vanished. Where is Sauron? He's disappeared. He must be up to something nefarious. So that's going to be a lot of the driver of the Rings of Power. But we know that he wasn't the only remnant of Morgoth's army that we've got going on out there. We've got a Balrog. I think from memory there were 3 Balrogs escaped somehow, but the Balrog we know about, Durin's Bane, he hid deep beneath what became Khazad-dûm, and he is there, and he emerges again in the story, obviously much later, and we see him in The Lord of the Rings. A whole load of orcs get scattered. They are hiding on the edges of society in the dark places, so the orcs survive, some of them, not many. Dragons, I think there's a passing reference from Tolkien that it was either 3 or 4 of them escaped, headed off to the northeast, to the Withered Heath, Grey Mountains up that far. They do stay quiet. We just hear rumors of them. We don't know the exact timings of this, but yes, the dwarf hordes which were created, the 7 dwarf hordes which were created, the clear implication is once the 7 dwarf lords had got their the Rings of Power, they dug greedily, amassed their hordes, and that attracted the dragons, and the dragons came in and took them. Will we see any in the Rings of Power? We're told that we will be going to far places in Middle-earth. I think in season 1 the answer will be no. The far places of Middle-earth will be places like Numenor that we've never seen, Lindon we've never seen, down into the far south and east towards what became Mordor, that kind of area. Whether in the future we head off and find where the dragons are, It's not central to this story, is the short answer. So we could, but not in season 1. And if I had to bet, I would say probably not in later seasons either. Oscar Lazo, staying on the Rings of Power theme, saying, hot take, coming up with the story for how Sauron took over Mordor is both respectful to the fandom and commercial red meat for normies. I actually agree with you. So this is one of the things which has come out in the course of the last couple of days. Actually, we've had a map, which was in one of the many bits of promotional materials which came out. We had a map of what was clearly Mordor or pre-Mordor, and the village that we've seen in some of these promo trailers. We see a character called Bronwyn, who's a herbalist there, and Arondir, that elf who seems to be doing lots of really cool things. They're based down in that village. That village appears to be in what we would now think of as Mordor. Clearly at the time, it's lush, it's green, it's pleasant. This is not the Mordor that we're aware of. Tolkien's Second Age history is when the Second Age started. We don't know what that part of the world was like, but Sauron was not there. The first we hear of him is in about the year 500, when apparently he starts moving. It's around the year 869, he says, from the dredges of his nerdy memory, when we get Gil-galad, who first writes to Numenor to say, there's something brewing in the southeast of Middle-earth. It's not just like a human. This is some servant of Morgoth who's there. This is Sauron who's moving there. Around the year 1000, he starts building Barad-dûr. The gaps are there. Tolkien deliberately left the gaps. This is the story of what happens. People would have been living in that area, and then Sauron's forces did take it. So I agree. Actually, I agree. It makes perfect sense for a story in the Second Age. If they're going to have some of it set down in that area, then we should see the rise of Sauron's forces, so that by the time we get halfway through the Second Age, Mordor should be completely under his control. But at the beginning, it was not. So I'm just quickly flicking through the chat. Okay, so Cloaked One picking up the missed super chat. Apologies for missing that. I do sometimes miss a few. This is from Billy B, saying, would you like to see the Haradrim in the show? They had their own troubles during the Second Age. Yeah, so this is Harad, which is the area sort of south of what we think of as Gondor and Mordor, that area going on down there. I would, because again, there are big gaps. Tolkien left big gaps in what he talked about in the Second Age, but it is quite important because they fall under Sauron's influence, but also they've got Numenor, this massive civilization, height of human civilization, on this big island off the west. And increasingly, the Numenorians start coming in and building. First, they were just trading ports, but then they turned into proper colonies. Then they started basically invading parts of the world, including areas in Harad. So I think we will see some of this. Now, interestingly, the village I was talking about a moment ago that it appears is actually in Mordor, we were told previously was in an area that they made up the name, but Tir Harad, the clear link across to Harad. So this is connected in. So they are aware of the Haradrim, and I hope that they will get shown a little bit more. But they won't be in the main story for season 1. I imagine this will be something I don't know, season 3 maybe ish, when Numenor is starting to really expand out. Okay, so let's go to a question from Colcasnark saying anything to do with Oliphants is good with me. Yeah, if we go down to that far, maybe we'll see an Oliphant. That would be Mega Bilbo, almost as good as seeing Glorfindel. Do you think we could see him in the show? We're going off on a little bit of a Lord of the Rings thing, which is great. Will we see Glorfindel? Tolkien ultimately decided that he would have re-arrived in Middle-earth during the Second Age, possibly with Ithrin Luin. Yes, so Glorfindel, for those who are unaware of the character, he appears in the novel The Lord of the Rings, not really in the TV show. A lot of his role was given over to Arwen, the person who came out and helped get Frodo across to Rivendell, escaping and evading the Black Riders. That was Glorfindel. And Glorfindel is a magnificent character. He was an elf in the First Age, a bit of a legend, bit of a hero. He, when the great city of Gondolin, the hidden city of Gondolin, finally gets breached, this is the last of the great cities, that great elven settlements that Morgoth and his army take down in the First Age. Finally, he finds it, sends in his huge army. A few stragglers and survivors manage to escape across this mountain pass. Glorfindel is there, basically defending their rear, and he's fighting away, and a Balrog appears and he takes out the Balrog. And it's a bit like the fight with Gandalf, is that he kills the Balrog, and the Balrog grabs hold of him, and they both fall to their death. And this battle is so epic battle of good versus evil. We're told the elves had this saying for generations later, that if there's something which was an epic battle between good and evil, they would say it's like Glorfindel against the Balrog. That's how epic it was. Glorfindel, being an elf, he goes off into the halls of Mandos, and basically he gets sent back to Middle-earth. He did such a great job. The Valar sent him back to Middle-earth, and Tolkien decides that he must have arrived in the Second Age. So I hope we get to see him. There might be rights issues. I'm not going to go down that route, but I'm not 100% sure whether him arriving in the Second Age is in the bits that they have got the rights to. But he should, and I would hate it if, for the second Lord of the Rings adaptation in a row, he gets overlooked unfairly. He's an amazing character. Question from Glenn Thrasher. I came in late. No question. Oh, thank you. I just wanted to say I love your odd backdrops for these Rings of Power / House of the Dragon doubleheaders. Yeah, so I'm glad you like this. I will be getting back to when I move to just focusing on one or the other, then they will be a lot more straightforward, I think. But I quite enjoy this little juxtaposition of different characters. Let's go to a question from Sam Day saying, hello, Robert. Which points, we'll go back to House of the Dragon for this one. Which points in the story for House of the Dragon do you think will make the best starts and endings for each season? Okay, this is something I have thought about way too much, I have to say. So for the Dance of the Dragons, I thought for a very long time, and I've said it on a few different previous live streams, I thought this was a 5-season arc. I think this works for me for a 5-season arc. I'm nervous about it being less than that. The showrunners are now hinting that this might be 3 seasons. I've decided, pretending that this is a negotiation between me and them, I'll go with 4, and I will allow 4 seasons. So where I think they could break this up, again, I think about this far too much detail. Season 1, we've got, as it stands, we've got the build up to the dance. We've got the build up to the outbreak of war. Where exactly they could end this in a number of different dramatic moments, when it's basically when Team Black decide that's it, we're just going all out for this, and that could be when they hear that Aegon has been crowned. That could be after we get the news comes back to them from the battle over Shipbreaker Bay, the first dragon versus dragon fight. It could be indeed after Blood and Cheese. Whichever moment they have, they're all quite close to one another. Whichever moment they have, this is the build up to the declaration, a real declaration of war once the gloves are off. Season 2, they could will start with the Greens in ascendancy. The Greens are they're in King's Landing. They've got all the trappings of power. Their guy is sitting on the Iron Throne. He's wearing King Aegon the Conqueror's crown. He's holding the sword Blackfire. Everything makes it look like he is the king. They've got all the money from the treasury. This season 2 could be the descent from there to the point at which the Blacks swoop in and take King's Landing. That would require quite a lot of going through a lot of different battles, but I think it's possible, and it works as an arc for me to take it all the way through from the point where the Blacks seem to be very much in a minority, to the point where they take King's Landing, and Rhaenyra seems to be suddenly she's queen. She's sitting on the Iron Throne. That would work as a nice way to end the season 2. She's now sitting on the Iron Throne. Season 3, then, you could have as the period of time where it's the turn for Team Black to start losing all momentum, and it could end with the storming of the Dragon Pit and her basically being chased out from King's Landing. That would work as a team. Season 2 is the rise of Team Black. Season 3 is the fall of Team Black. Season 4 then is all of what follows, which takes you through the lots of the death of lots of different dragons, Rhaenyra's death, Aegon II's death, and the Hour of the Wolf. So that would, and the end point is the end of the Hour of the Wolf, when Cregan Stark turns around and says, right, it's time to go back to Winterfell. That, I think, is the end of it. So 4 seasons I could work with that kind of arc. I think less than that, that would just be rushing through the story too much, for me anyway. Question from Beesman. Any dragons we can expect to see in Rings? Let's have a friendly war in chat. Which books did dragons best? Song of Ice and Fire versus Witcher versus Hobbit, Lord of the Rings. Well, by all means in the chat, go and discuss this. Who does dragons best? Song of Ice and Fire, Witcher, or The Hobbit? I mean, I think this is more a Song of Ice and Fire versus Hobbit / Lord of the Rings. I think the Witcher obviously has got a dragon playing a crucial role, but it's not as central. But I will allow the chat to have a conversation about that. And in terms of the dragons we can expect to see in the Rings of Power, I did actually answer that question just a moment ago. So if you don't mind, I will not answer it twice, but I will refer you back a little bit higher or a bit earlier in the chat. Username redacted. How many main character POVs are there in both shows? Well, I don't think they will work it in quite the same way, so it's not going to be quite that straightforward. But in terms of the Rings of Power, they're talking about 5 different bases. Which, to see if I can try and remember them. So Linden is going to be one of them. Khazad-dûm is going to be one of them. Numenor will be one of them, and the sort of the Tir Harad area that we now think is going to be Mordor is going to be one of them, and one other that I can't immediately think of off the top of my head. But they're going to have various hubs, places where people are based. In terms of the characters whose eyes we will see this through, initially Galadriel is going to be the main character that we see a lot of this through, but we're also going to see, I'm sure, Elrond. We're also going to see Durin, Prince Durin. This is, I think we're going to see a lot through his perspective. Down in the sort of the southeast, then I think Bronwyn and Arondir, we will see a lot from their perspective. I'm not 100% sure yet in terms of Numenor, whose perspective we're going to be seeing things through. Initially, I think it's going to be Galadriel coming from what we've seen. Galadriel will be visiting Numenor, and we're going to see it from her perspective. But once she's gone, things will still be happening on Numenor. So it'll be interesting to see whose eyes we're going to be seeing that through. In terms of House of the Dragon, though, I think the main characters we will be seeing this through their eyes, basically. It will be Viserys a lot to start with, but also Rhaenyra and Alicent. Daemon is definitely going to be one of the main characters that we see this through. And then sometimes we will be slipping down into the younger generation. So there are a few scenes where it's just people like Aemond and the Strong Boys. And so we will have to see it through their perspective as well. Question from Glenn Thrasher. There's an article by Lynn Forest Hill, Medieval Context in Modern Fantasy Fiction, J.R.R. Tolkien and George R.R. Martin in the Tolkien Society Bulletin. Sounds fascinating. I would love to read that. Thank you very much for bringing that to my attention. Roman Lakovets. If the Targaryen kings were aware of the Long Night, why didn't they pay more attention to the North and have a stronger union with House Stark? Well, this has been my main concern with this all the way through, and this was what when this came up before. This was before Fire and Blood was released. George R.R. Martin did a little video interview or a clip really, where he says some people have speculated that Aegon the Conqueror invaded Westeros because he had he'd got some prophecy about the White Walkers and having to unite the Seven Kingdoms, and everyone was like, "Oh, is this going to be in Fire and Blood?" And then Fire and Blood came out, and it wasn't there at all. That wasn't a new bit of information that he'd given us. So this kind of left a whole load of questions, and my biggest argument against this was the fact that he did not go to the north. Yes, he went to the north, but he went to White Harbor. It took him an age to get to Winterfell, and I don't think he ever went to the Wall. And this completely undermines the idea that he saw a threat from the others. So this is all about the exact wording, all about the exact wording of this prophecy or the dream, whatever it is. If Aegon had a vision, a dream, a prophecy that says you have to go over and unite the Seven Kingdoms against a great external threat, then that makes absolute sense, because he doesn't know where the threat is. So his aim is to unite the Seven Kingdoms, and it explains completely why he was so obsessed by getting Dawn into the Seven Kingdoms, because he felt it was his role to get everybody all united into one entire continent ruled by the Targaryens. So I think, until I hear otherwise, and maybe I will hear otherwise in 3 days' time, who knows? I think until I hear otherwise, that Aegon's vision was not about the White Walkers, or at least he did not make the connection to the Wall. He just got some vision idea that he had to unite the Seven Kingdoms. It was later that we get this link across to the others. Jay Singh, what do you think the plot will be for the Jon Snow sequel? Just your opinion. Okay, so the Jon Snow sequel, for those, I'm sure nobody missed this as news, but Kit Harington had approached HBO and George R. R. Martin with an idea for a Jon Snow spin-off show, which would be, I don't think we've had 100% confirmation, but it's like must be later, because it can't be during the time of A Song of Ice and Fire, and he was just too young really for earlier. So this is afterwards. This is when he's beyond the wall. Now, what this is, I said at the time, and I think everybody said at the time, reaction is just like, I feel like Jon Snow's story is told by A Song of Ice and Fire. I don't think, well, I think I would need a lot of convincing that that was a good idea. I have heard rumors that what has been pitched is this isn't just a vanity project, which is the concern, that actually this is a good idea, it's a good script. Kit Harington has got a good team. This isn't just him coming up and say, hey, I want to carry on with this character. This is an idea that could work, that George R. R. Martin has said, okay, we can explore this. So that bit all sounds good, promising. I still need a bit of convincing, but it sounds promising. As to what it could be, well, it has to be him north of the wall, and it has to be him. I think it has to be a character journey about him, who he is, what he wants to be, because at the end of the story, and this is building off, for one moment, I think we need to forget the books and just focus in on the TV show, because this is a spin-off from the TV show, not a spin-off from the books. So forget what may or may not happen in the books. On the TV show, Jon Snow is a broken man. I think he will be in the books as well. But he's a broken man. He's never sought power, and yet he's this leader that people always seem to follow. He's seen all of the people closest to him killed. He himself has killed the woman that he loved after discovering that she's actually his aunt. This is horrific. The previous woman that he loved also died. Horrific moments. This is after he basically betrayed her. He's a broken human. So for this story to work, this has to be about him. Just imagine like a kind of an angsty me discovering who I am after everything has happened. That could work. Normally in some kind of fantasy fiction, this kind of thing works best with a really kind of old grizzled character who's been through a lifetime and now is facing some kind of final challenge. Who are they? What do they really stand for? I'm thinking, for those who are fans of classic fantasy, things like Druss the Legend by David Gemmell, that kind of thing works really well. Also the Gene Wolfe stories, Book of the New Sun, that character comes across very world weary. That can work. It definitely can work. I hope that that's roughly where they're going. And if they are connecting this with what the situation north of the wall has to be, which is complete devastation, they are there trying against the elements to be repopulating the north. That could be a survival story where he, as a human being, discovers who he actually is. That could work. I don't know how, but it could work. Maybe they try and settle Hardhome. Maybe I don't. This is just. I think I probably came up with something similar last time I was asked about this. But let's just say he starts falling in love again, but he fights against it because every time he falls in love, it goes wrong. But then some slavers come and take away this woman. He has to go and rescue her, and he realizes that this is that kind of thing. It could work. It doesn't just have to be a sort of a star vehicle. Cloaked One, picking up for Kaziglu Bay. Thank you. I love it when people do this, picking up questions for others. What do you think of the cast choices for House of the Dragon? I'm personally excited for Daemon and Rhaenyra Targaryen and Corlys Velaryon. They're easily the most interesting characters. I think they all look good. Honestly, the casting for Game of Thrones, just to take a step back, the casting of Game of Thrones, when you just stop and think about it, actually was pretty good. They nailed almost every character there, and it looks really, for House of the Dragon, it looks good so far. George R. R. Martin has himself specifically singled out Paddy Considine as Viserys, as adding a he had a wonderful phrase for it. I wish I could remember what it was. Tragic majesty, I think that's what it was, for adding tragic majesty to this character in a way that he hadn't in Fire and Blood. So he singled him out. The reviews for episode 1 that I've seen have singled out Matt Smith. And also, I don't know her name, but the person who was playing Emma Arryn apparently is astonishing. But yeah, Matt Smith, I had high hopes for to start with. I think that he can definitely carry this. In terms of the characters, I mean, what I've seen in the trailers looks good, but I like to see a character developed over time rather than just like snippets of this and that. A lot of the characters look great. I agree, Corlys looks great. I agree, Rhaenyra looks great. I think Rhaenys looks amazing as well. But I will hold judgment until I see them in the show itself. But I was excited beforehand about Paddy Considine. I thought he was the perfect choice, and I'm excited that George R. R. Martin says now yes, that he did do a great job. So that's probably the one I'm looking forward to most. Elise Phipps saying, caught you late this time, but you need to know your Tom Bombadil song was fantastic on your previous live. Bravo. Thank you very much. For those who missed it, this was a little treat and a thank you for my moderators who do a fantastic job. Talking of which, it's that time. Moderators, thank you. You are absolutely amazing. It's going to be a really busy few weeks coming up, moderators, but in advance, thank you. If you are here watching live in the chat, please do give the moderators a little bit of love. They do a fantastic job, and particularly when we get to the time when we've got TV show actually happening, as well as trying to zap any trolls and making it an incredibly welcoming and caring chat, zapping any spoilers, which they do with ridiculous speed, is a great thing. So thank you very much. Your videos are outstanding, and I can't wait to see what you put together next. Well, next is House of the Dragon, an introduction, coming out tomorrow. That's my next one. But thank you very much. Let's go to... Oh, actually, and while we're here, I will just do a very quick announcement. My pre-show live streams starting this Sunday, my pre-show live streams for both House of the Dragon and for the Rings of Power, they are all through the duration of those shows. They are all going to be charity live streams. I've just made a decision. I think we can raise huge amounts of money for charity through the live streams. Hopefully there will be lots of people there in the chat. So starting this Sunday, all of the pre-show live streams, they will be in aid of Alzheimer's care and research, which is a cause very close to my heart, and believe me, it will make a huge difference. So starting Sunday, the live streams, the pre-show live streams, will be charity live streams. Connected to that, you may, if you have a little look, you may find that there is now a join button somewhere on your screen, which is a channel membership, which is a thing that I'm experimenting with. I'm going to see how it goes, but this is another way to support the channel if you so wish. The idea here is that if you're the chat will be going through, that YouTube have not sorted out how to do the equivalent of super chats for charity live streams, which is fine. So if you're wishing to get yourself noticed in the chat by asking a question, then if you click on the join button, you're then a channel member, and then your question will be highlighted. At least that's the theory. But the best way, if you do wish to support this channel, the best way to do that is still through Patreon. There is a link down in the description. So I think those are the parish notices over. Alexandra with a question saying, if Maester Aemon took the throne instead of Egg, do you think he would have gone mad? Do I think Maester Aemon would have gone mad, or do I think Egg would have gone mad? I think Egg was probably, he became obsessed with dragons. We don't know the detail of this. This is one of the big things that we're going to be learning, I'm sure, in Dunk and Egg later on. Exactly what was it that pushed him to be that obsessed with dragons? I wonder, given what George R. Martin has been saying recently, I wonder whether he started getting dragon dreams. That would be fascinating if we got that in a Dunk and Egg story, where Dunk's going along and then Egg just suddenly starts talking to him about this dream that he had. We have had dragon dreams in Dunk and Egg already, so the hints are there by two different characters, incidentally. So the hints are there, but that's the thinking. I think he probably would still have gone. I mean, mad is not the right way, I don't think, from what we've seen, but obsessed. I think that's the idea. Maester Aemon, I mean, Maester Aemon is one of those great rulers who never was, and it's his wisdom that stopped him from being the king, and that is the people who make the best rulers are often the people who are the people who don't want it. So there we go. Let's go with Beesman, welcome to channel member. Welcome. You are my first ever channel member, so thank you very much. Andrew K saying, George R. Martin is the authority and can retcon what he wants, but not sure I love the other's prophecy motivation with the Targs. Can be used to whitewash and excuse many Targ actions in hindsight. Yeah, I have these same concerns, but what I give George R. R. Martin the credit here is that he does not write two-dimensional stuff. He writes three-dimensional characters and themes. And I do wonder whether he can see that the Targaryens, as it stands, are quite two-dimensional. They are conquering baddies, and he presented them through a Song of Ice and Fire, through Daenerys, who is a sympathetic character. And so that is how we have been seeing them. But I think that he now realizes when we see House of the Dragon, if we didn't have any of that, then we would just see these incredibly pompous and arrogant, entitled people who are who were there saying, "I'm nearly a god." That's literally, this is what they're saying. I'm nearly a god. I'm so much above all of you peasants. So bow down before me. That is literally what the attitude is. And so he is sort of balancing this. So I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt. As I say, we have to wait and see what all of this is. It will start coming out this season of House of the Dragon. And from what George R. R. Martin says, he will develop a lot of this in the Winds of Winter. So expect not just to get more about this in House of the Dragon, but also to get more about this in the Winds of Winter when that comes. Okay, let's go to question from Ruven Devender saying, more of a general question, but what external content, theories, and analysis on the Song of Ice and Fire books do or did you read or watch? Videos, blogs, podcasts, forums, subreddits, etc. Yeah, it's an interesting question. I do get asked this quite a bit. Who do I where do I read? What videos do I watch? And the honest answer at the moment is not a lot. I wish I had the time to read around a whole lot more, to watch more people's videos. There are so many fantastic content creators out there, and in the world of A Song of Ice and Fire, this world has expanded out. It started out with Reddit and a few podcasts. Now we've got blogs, we've got YouTubers. There's even a sort of burgeoning TikTok that at some point I may well join. Who knows? But in terms, so at the moment, not much time to do any of it, I'm afraid. What I would say is keep an eye out for the people that I have on my channel. I will only have people on this channel if I think they're worth you looking at their content. I will give a few quick shout outs to places that I would highly recommend. History of Westeros, I've already mentioned, collaborators with me. Please do go and check out their channel. I'd also highly recommend Radio Westeros. Matt, Joe Magician, who I don't know whether he's still in the chat, he does fantastic content as well. He has, and I'm sure he won't mind me saying this, he sometimes has some slightly left field theories which challenge the status quo of the groupthink which happens so much in all of these kinds of worlds. And I love that because it provides a chance to see things from a slightly different angle. And sometimes, as with this Targaryen prophecy idea, sometimes he is very, very right. So I would highly recommend that. Learned Hands podcast. There are a few more. Alt-Shift-X, obviously, if you're wanting straightforward, down the line explanations of what's going on. And if you're watching live, put some more suggestions in the chat. I'll happily shout out a few more. I've missed out people I know. That was just who was off the top of my head. Fionn Murray, will House of the Dragon be more or less popular with casual audiences than Game of Thrones? People will be able to pick sides and debate, but the lack of moral clarity means fan things like the Burlington Bar won't really exist. I don't think it will be as popular as Game of Thrones, for the simple reason the Game of Thrones was a cultural phenomenon. It was the biggest TV show ever. So if this can be just half as popular as Game of Thrones, then it's a win. So will it still be popular with casual fans? I think it will. I think it will be very popular. I think that there will be some who won't like quite how dark it is. There are no characters that you can, or very few characters that you can inexplicably you can just categorically support and say, I love that character, I'm supporting them on their side, because even the characters you might think are in the right often do really quite horrendous things as well. So I think it'll be harder watching, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's worse. If you take something like Breaking Bad, for example, that had a whole load of characters, or The Wire, a whole load of characters. It's hard to say which characters in either of those shows are the ones that you're rooting for, because they're always good. There was bad things on both. Bad characters doing good things and good characters doing bad things. Ramon Flores saying, love your channel. Why the Targaryens never tried to invade Essos? So this is an interesting question, because the Targaryens, we ask often why it took them 100 years to go from Dragonstone over to Westeros, but why didn't they just go back and retake Essos? This prophecy does seem to be a reason for that. This idea that they feel now that their duty, their role in life, is to be holding the Seven Kingdoms together. That's what they're supposed to do, which is why they didn't try and take over any of Essos. I think the slightly more detailed answer to that is that if the house and the dragons had carried on growing in the way that they were until they were interrupted by the Dance of the Dragons, then they probably would have done. in all honesty. What you see just before the Dance of the Dragons is they're already starting. There are dragon riders who just, they're no longer in the center of power. What are they going to do? I'll go off and make my own kingdom. This is what happened. Daemon Targaryen, he gets chucked out of court. What's he going to do? I'll go and invade the Stepstones, and I'll become king of the Stepstones in the Narrow Sea. That kind of thing would have just carried on happening. I'm absolutely sure. You get dragon riders, there's no chance of some of them becoming king. Where are they going to go? Well, I'll invade Lys, and I'll make that my home. Who's gonna stand before me? I've got a dragon. I dare say if that had carried on, they would have taken over Essos. But the Dance of the Dragons did happen, and the dragons died, and then suddenly they didn't have the power to. A reflective rambling. Gentle Ben 86, thank you for all the fantastic content. You're very welcome. Which group do you think was the best Kingsguard? Jaehaerys' first 7, the Mad King's last 7. Are they different? Well, they're different. I think it depends on what you mean by best. So in terms of quality of soldier, perhaps Aerys' last one was higher. Quality of fighter. Arthur Dane, Barristan Selmy, these are legends in their own lifetimes. So that was incredibly high caliber. But I think George R. R. Martin wants us to see the Kingsguard not just as how good were they as fighters, but the loyalty going on there. The loyalty was so strong that it blinded them to right and wrong. And the member of the King's Guard who did make the moral decision to save hundreds of thousands of lives, Jaime, gets castigated for it. So it's harder. Some of the earlier King's Guards were fearsomely good. I would place Aerys II's last one very, very high, but the character flaws are just too much for me. Cloaked One picking up question for Ben Ellis, saying slightly off topic, but you talk about all these different fantasy stories. Do you play Dungeons and Dragons? I do. I've not got a regular game, but I do play every now and then. Yes. So there is a Dungeons and Dragons film coming out next year, in case you missed it. There is a trailer. It looks like it's going to be silly fun. Let's put it that way. That seems to be where they're aiming for, is not highbrow, high fantasy entertainment, but quite a fun romp. Let's go with a question from Chase, saying, hey Rob, hey Chase, I have a question about Fire and Blood. After reading it and getting past all the excitement of the Dance of the Dragons, I was so confused about who was who and what was going on with everyone with the same name and the family tree at the end that it did not make things any easier. While the Regency era was interesting, it was also very confusing. Who exactly did young Aegon marry? The first was the daughter of the older Aegon, but who was the one who came after she died? And did Peake kill her? Lord Peake, that is. What was going on with Viserys and his wife from Lys? Okay, so I'll give a high level what happened after the dance. So we have the Aegon the Elder, Aegon II, who was killed. Aegon III takes over. The idea is to mend some bridges to bring the sides back together. So he was on Rhaenyra's team, he was on the Blacks, and so in order to bring the kingdom together, they married him across to Jaehaera Targaryen, who was Aegon II's daughter. That's a very good political decision, but she then died. She was almost certainly asked whether she was killed by Unwin Peake. Almost certainly, yes. Unwin Peake was a very powerful figure just after the Dance of the Dragons. Ancient House Peake, and he became Hand of the King. He clearly was trying to get his even more power for himself. He wanted the king to marry his daughter. He wanted to be a part of the royal family, which is an echo of Otto Hightower, perhaps before. But so it was very strongly hinted, arranged for Jaehaera's death. And then we had this kind of bizarre beauty pageant. He tried to change the rules again and again and again, just to try and make it that the king, Aegon, would decide his daughter was the right person, but it didn't work. It just did not work. And then eventually we get this new Daenerys Velaryon is introduced by Baelor and Rhaena Velaryon. I forget exactly what their names are. If you're confused by the names, do not worry. Everyone gets confused by the names. She gets brought in, this young girl who is a granddaughter of Vaemond Velaryon. So she is distantly related to the Velaryons and therefore also the Targaryens. She has the blood of old Valyria in her, so this is a reasonable match. And she is related to Corlys Velaryon, and through him, of course, to the wider Targaryens. So this was not a political match. It was a good match. It was somebody that made Aegon, who was quite a sullen, grumpy child, she made him smile. And so this was a good match. And that lasted... Unwin Peake tried to kill her too, it would appear, but failed. And he didn't last all that long. What happened with Lys, the Lysine Spring? So we get Viserys, who is the brother of Aegon III. He was, during the Dance of the Dragons, one of the decisions that Rhaenyra made was to try and get some of her young children off, safe and away, to Essos. That plan didn't work. The fleet that was taking them there got ambushed, and everybody thought Viserys, he died or got carried off. They don't know, but he disappeared off the face of the earth. He reappeared after the Dance of the Dragons when Aegon III was king. He reappeared there, and he was married to a woman from Lys, Rogaire, the Rogaire family, who then Aegon III welcomed him. This was his beloved brother. Again, one of the few things that made him smile. And Viserys, going forward in the story, is going to be hugely important. But he arrives back, and what happens then is suddenly Lys and the Rogaire family, they start amassing control in King's Landing. But the entire continent and the Targaryen family was decimated by the Civil War. The biggest houses, the great houses, were run without... everyone had been killed, so they were all being run by children, effectively. The heads of all of these main houses were largely children. The House Arryn, the Lannisters, the Tullys, lots of them, that young people were doing this. And we had a child on the throne. We have a regency. He's not even old enough. All 7 kingdoms was completely rocked and to a large degree rudderless. And so the Lysini delegation came in and grabbed power. But then they lost all their money and got kicked out. So that was what it was. So the regency is a series of... there is a power vacuum and lots of different people come in to try and gain power, some cleverly, some not so cleverly. The Rogaire family succeed for a short period of time, but then lose out. Unwin Peak succeeds for a short period of time, but then loses out. The Maesters appear to succeed secretly. They run the country for 6 months a year. We don't hear about what they do. Very suspicious. And then at the end of it all, Aegon III, on his name down, his 16th birthday, comes in and says, right, I'm the king. Everybody clear out. I'm now in charge. And that's pretty much where Fire and Blood Part 1 ends. So that's what happens, is that we got all of these different people trying to get control and generally failing. Jakob Bergfist, thank you very much for the super chat. Didn't see a question attached to that. I'm sure one of the moderators will pick up on that if there was one. Paul McGuigan saying, does anything interesting ever happen in the southwest of Middle-earth, such as Tharbad, Longbear, and Erin Van? Southeast and northwest get all the action. I mean, I think the short well, the first thing to say is, and although this will look, I'm drawing it in the wrong way around, obviously you get the map of Middle-earth, the southwest gets, there's not much of it. You get the mountains which come down, the Misty Mountains, which go almost to the very bottom of Middle-earth, cutting off the western half from the eastern half. The bit over on the eastern side, does anything much happen? Well, the Numenorians built a few colonies there for a while. Galadriel randomly moves there for a little bit during her travels in the Second and Third Age. The elves were up in Lindon, so a few of them sort of moved out and down there. But basically, once Gondor, although Gondor technically sort of extended out that far, not much is the short answer. So no, things did happen, but it wasn't the center of activity. Philip, why was Dany given something as valuable as dragon eggs if Illyrio was really backing young Griff? Shouldn't he have got them? Yeah, so this is, well, I think there are two levels to this. The first is that George R. R. Martin developed the story. This is one of his gardening writing things, I think, is that the concept of young Griff, I think, came to him a bit later. But so Dany was the focus to start with. Young Griff doesn't get a mention in his original pitch to his agent, for example. It's all about Dany. But so that, I think, is the first answer. But the in-world answer is that, and again, another video that I've been saying I'm going to do for ages and never have quite got around to, is what exactly is Varys and Illyrio's plan. But their plan, it appears to be that they are thinking that they would marry Griff to Daenerys. The dragon eggs, and it's really important, we always think about these are dragon eggs, they're going to hatch. Nobody thought they were going to hatch. These were given as a gift. They were incredibly valuable, but they were given as a symbol, not as a, you're going to have dragons. So they didn't think, so Illyrio didn't think, I'm giving Dany the potential to have some dragons to invade anywhere. He thought that he was giving her something that was incredibly valuable, that would make her remember him and therefore be, on his side when he reappears a little bit later and makes a few introductions. So that's the idea, is that this is just something symbolic, something thoughtful, something very valuable, and it tells us a lot about who Illyrio is as a person. Reactive Rambling, picking up on Jakob Bergfist. Happy to catch you live. What is, in your opinion, the most important aspect to consider if you want someone to care about a character you introduce? Interesting question. I think it's understanding what drives them, understanding what they want and need. For a character to work, they have to have something which pushes them forward, and then there has to be some sort of obstacle that is getting in their way that they have to overcome. That is the essence of character and character development. if we don't understand who they are and what they are like as a person, then we cannot actually buy into them as a character. And just if you go back to pull a couple of examples, if you go back to Game of Thrones book 1, Dany, we very quickly get a lot of sympathy for Dany as a character, because we see things from her perspective. We start to understand who she is, and we see people doing bad things to her. And when bad things are happening to her, we are instinctively thinking, she doesn't deserve that. That's not fair. Why is that happening to her? Why is her brother doing these things to her? Why is all of it? And that is what is making us sympathetic, is because we're understanding who she is and what is driving her. She is not there wanting to be nasty to people. She's not wanting there to hurt anybody. In fact, she's trying her best to please everyone in the first few chapters. That seems to be what's driving her, and so that gives us her sympathy. And with Tyrion, it's an understanding of how he has been treated, so that we can see, we're first introduced to him from other people, what other people say about him and what other people's experiences of him are, but then we experience it through his eyes, and we understand him, and we're sympathetic towards him because we know what he's been through, and we can see how people are treating him. Chaos Ballerina message retracted. I'm not sure what that's about. If that was a mistake, if one of the moderators could pop it into the chat, that's great. Roman Lakovets saying, why is Ryam Redwine such a bad hand of the king? That's one of the ones I will have to come back to next week. Actually, I think there was one I said I was going to come back to from last week, and apologies, I didn't do that. Next Thursday is the last of these open Q&As before we're just doing all of the show stuff. I will answer that one next week, Roman, so apologies for not having an answer off the top of my head. Schmacklaus saying, favorite location in Middle-earth? I love the Helcaraxa. That's the sort of the icy land bridge between the Western continent and the Eastern continent in Middle-earth. Favorite location? Ooh, tough one. I think, thinking in terms of the Rings of Power, the Khazad-dûm at its height is going to work perfectly for me, but I'm fascinated about Numenor. It's somewhere that we have some information about, and it's the height of human civilization. I've always wanted to see Numenor. Morning Throners saying, how canon is House of the Dragon going to be? Will things like Maester Conspiracy or Dragon Eggs in Winterfell, if true in this show, be true in the main Song of Ice and Fire books? I love your content. Well, thank you. This is a big question, and it's a question that we don't have a full answer to. And if somebody in the chat ages ago, I saw, I'm afraid I didn't see who it was, said, what would I asked George R. R. Martin, this would be one of the questions I'd ask him, is his view of canonicity, because he talks about trying to keep the show's canon, which is a curious way of framing it, because clearly House of the Dragon is going to be different to what we have in the world of A Song of Ice and Fire and Fire and Blood. It is going to be slightly different, but is what George R. R. Martin's view going to be that there are some things which happened on the show that they just were badly reported in the book Fire and Blood? But Fire and Blood is a history book, an in-world history book, let's not forget. So maybe what we're seeing in House of the Dragon is the truth of what happened, and Fire and Blood is just the recording of that history, which may or may not be true. That would be quite a meta way for George R. R. Martin to kind of work around this idea of how does the show, which will have differences to the books, match up with the books. I think where there are differences, we will still go with the books as canon. But it's George R. R. Martin's world, and if he says that these things are canon, then they're canon. I think he's become a lot clearer recently about the fact that Game of Thrones, the TV show, and A Song of Ice and Fire are two separate things. And so I think that we may well end up with this bizarre situation where George R. R. Martin is telling us that the main Game of Thrones TV show is not canon, but all of the spin-offs are canon, which would be bizarre, but that's roughly where we're headed. The bigger question, of course, is who decides what canon is? Do we decide? Is it the fandom? Is it George R. R. Martin himself? If it's George R. R. Martin himself, nobody has asked him this question outright. What is canon? And that will be not. But they asked him questions around this about Game of Thrones, and he came up with they're different things, but not about this wider expanded universe. They haven't yet. Asteroid Yeti saying, are you looking forward to Amazon's Lord of the Rings series, and what are your predictions for the series? I'm looking forward to it. Yes, absolutely. It's going to be what are my predictions for it? It's going to look beautiful. The music is going to be amazing. I think that there will be some things which are absolutely fantastic, and there are going to be some things which are going to really infuriate the fans. That's my prediction. There are so many just small bits and pieces that just from the trailers I look at and go, I'm not sure how that fits in. Some of them they've made clear decisions on. The time compression is probably going to have bigger impacts in later seasons than in season one. I have a feeling at the very least we're going to get some high quality fantasy TV, which has the Middle Earth as its backdrop. Whether it feels like Tolkien, I don't think any of us can say until we see it. But yes, I'm looking forward to it. I don't think, even if it goes against a lot of Tolkien lore, for me that in no way sullies the books. The books are still there. The books are always going to be there. There's nothing that this TV show can do to take away from the magnificence of the books. So it'll be the same as any of the other adaptations that we've had, and we've had several now. Let's not forget we've had radio adaptations. We've had what I suppose we would now call anime adaptations, as well as the main films, and they've had good points and they've had bad points, and I think that everyone can decide whether or not they take or leave each of them, and that's the approach that I've got to this. Andrew K, I think he's picking up on the Caius Ballerina question. It is assumed that Dreamfire is the mother of Dany's dragons, so she should be a similar build. Then it is said she is not built for battle. This is from Steph Hunter. Okay, so thank you for picking up for the question for Steph Hunter. So the three dragons we have, the three eggs that Dany gets are the eggs that were stolen way back in Jaehaerys the First's time. They were stolen by Alyssa Farman. Almost had a mind blank there. Always get at least one mind blank every live stream. They were stolen by Alyssa Farman. She went to Bravos. She sold them to the Sea Lord. That got her enough money that she could buy herself a ship that she could then sail around the world. The clear implication from what George R. R. Martin has written is that those three then stayed in Bravos for the next couple of 100 years. They didn't hatch. They were then assumed that they would never hatch, and that is how Illyrio could manage to get his hands on them. So if these came from Dreamfire, does this mean that the dragons that are there that come from those are going to be like Dreamfire? That doesn't seem to be the case from what we said. It doesn't seem to be, given that all of the dragons that we have in House of the Dragon and at the start of the Dance of the Dragons, there are 20 dragons. They're all different, and they came from just 5 dragons that came across from Valyria initially, and then obviously the 3 dragons which invaded Westeros. So it's not just that you get from the parent dragon, it's an exact copy. There is something else going on. Maybe they will give us a little bit more of this in House of the Dragon. They certainly have been thinking more about it, but I think the answer is no, that the parent dragon who laid that egg is not going to be replicated exactly in the looks and appearance of the dragon that is born from that egg, if that makes sense. Let's go to a question from Creative Branches saying, hello, any holidays on Middle-earth or in Planetos you hope to see? Yes, there are. I mean, I always want to see Yuletide, which is in Middle-earth, but on Planetos, George R. R. Martin hasn't gone big on sort of holidays and things like that. But what I would love to see, because it actually has a role in this, is there is this tradition on Numenor that 3 times a year the king would lead the people up Mount Meneltama, and they would pray and give thanks to Eru Ilúvatar. And the eagles who were nested there would bear witness to this, and then the people would file back down. I would love to see that. That starts not happening later on when Numenor starts to fall, but I would love to see the people led to the top of Mount Meneltama and the eagles. That would be absolutely amazing. Question from Rose Gould saying, hi Robert, love your content. Thank you. Thanks to you, I've been cracking through A Song of Ice and Fire. Excellent. And I've just started A Dance of Dragons. My question is, in Westeros, are people whose mother died in childbirth considered kinslayers? In Westeros, are people whose mother died in childbirth considered kinslayers? It's an interesting question. It's a question I've not been asked before, so I'm trying to work my way through it. I don't think so specifically, no, but it's clear that 3 of our main characters, George R. R. Martin has made their mother die in childbirth, being Tyrion, Dany, and Jon. His mother died, it would appear, a week or 2 later, but from complications from childbirth. Now, we never hear of Dany as being called a kinslayer. Jon, obviously, Ned kept his secret safe. Tyrion, though, is an interesting case because he is treated by his father as having killed his mother. And Cersei also picks up on this a few times as well. But that appears to be a specific thing about him rather than more broadly. Women dying in childbirth happened a lot back in medieval times in our world and in Westeros. And I think the answer, I'm very happy if there's someone in the chat who can contradict me on this, but I think the answer is no, not generally, but obviously people who are grieving do go through this. 444 saying, hi Robert, George R. R. Martin often mentioned that he's a gardener writer, but when he adds some new thread or character in books 3, 4, or 5 of A Song of Ice and Fire, they usually fit so well that there's the impression that this was planned from the start, even if this is not something mentioned or foreshadowed in previous books. So what is his writing method? Is he more of an architect than he wants to admit, or he spends hours to fit every detail so as not to contradict previous books? Or maybe he writes everything deliberately and in an ambiguous way, which could be expanded in many different directions. You also asked, will I do introduction videos to House of the Dragon and Lord of the Rings, like I did for Sandman and Wheel of Time? Yes, in answer to that last bit, yes, I will be. Tomorrow is my House of the Dragon introduction, and then my Rings of Power introduction will be a day or so before that drops. In terms of is he really as big a gardener writer as he says? Is he actually an architect? Yes, there is an element. I don't know if I'd ever dare say this to his face, but there definitely is an element of the writer doth protest too much here. He clearly has got some things planned out. He said as much himself. He knows how the outlines of how the story is going to end, and he's known them right from the beginning. He's said this several times, and a lot of the time he does kind of fence himself in. A lot of the imagery and symbolism does echo forwards. He does try and make things as seamless as possible. You can see the cracks a few times here or there. We mentioned a couple of them actually slightly earlier in this stream. There's also a classic example of Darkstar, Gerald Dane, who was introduced as a result of George R. R. Martin changing his mind on having a 5-year time gap. He was going to have a 5-year time gap to allow everybody to age up 5 years, and then he changed his mind and didn't. And that meant that some young characters who he was going to have do things when they got older, he had to introduce another character to cover that. Gerald Dane was introduced to do some of the things that Edric Dane was going to do when he grew up, but he wasn't going to be old enough. So you can sometimes see some of the cracks. He is, I think, needless to say, an excellent writer. So when he does introduce new things, when his muse takes him in a new direction, he is good enough, yes, to draw a line all the way through. But when he establishes certain things, like the classic foreshadowing of that first Bran chapter, when we get the dire wolf pups and you get the wolf mother impaled by a stag, he was setting that up for what happened later in the book. That was a structure, that was a bit of architecture that he established early on. Similarly, he's aware of writing necessities. He talks a couple of times, he's talked about Chekhov's gun, which is this classic writing idea that if a gun is on the wall and highlighted in Act 1 of a story, then by the end of the story it has to have been used. And this is something that he comes back to, and he talks about Chekhov's super pack of wolves all the way through, dotted throughout the story, ever since Arya has chased away her dire wolf Nymeria. We just get these updates about there's a wolf pack in the area. There's now a massive wolf pack. It's a wolf pack led by a huge giant dire wolf in the area. It's now starting to do these things. George R. R. Martin he's been honest, and he says, of course I'm going to use that. They have to be used. They are Chekhov's super pack of wolves. So there are some, he is very aware of this. Similarly, Jon's parentage, he set this up as he can't not reveal Jon's parentage in the story. That has to be revealed later on. So he is an architect to a degree, but what he means when he's saying he's a gardener is that he will allow these different characters and strands and plots to go where they will, which is why we get a story which has expanded out hugely to the point that we're at the moment, which is why one of the reasons why the Winds of Winter has taken so long, because he has allowed this garden to grow so massive. Now he's having to prune it and bring it back down again. Vincent Anthony, Aragorn or the Mountain? Who are you taking in a duel? The Mountain is 8 foot tall and the strongest person in all of Westeros. Aragorn couldn't take him, but Aragorn would be clever enough not to take him on one-on-one, I think, is the short answer there. Emma Scheinman saying, hi, Robert, long-time patron, first-time Patreon question submitter here. Fantastic. This is one of, and I always say thank you to my patrons. Thank you so much. Hugely appreciate your support. I cannot do what I do without your support. If you would like to support this channel, there's a link down in the description to Patreon. That is the best way to do that. But first-time Patreon question. I want to preface this by saying that people of colour do not need a justification to exist in fantasy stories. Amen to that. I have a theory that came out of arguing with someone who took issue with the castings of the Velaryon family. I would love to hear your thoughts. My theory is that, based on the geographical location of Old Valyria on one of the southernmost points of Essos, native Valyrians likely would have had dogs. The Targaryens and other dragon-riding families are pale, not because they're racially white as we understand it in our world, but because the blood of the dragon changes the way their bodies react to light and UV radiation as well as heat. This would mean that the Targaryens' whiteness is a magical aberration, akin to magical albinism, and that most people in Old Valyria would have looked more like the Velaryons will on the show. I love the explanation. I think that's as good as anything we've had on this. I think the George R. R. Martin. Well, first of all, just to echo, I don't think there's any need for a justification, particularly for this. The showrunners have been very open that they didn't want to just do a show with lots of white people in, but the internal logic here is, I think, reasonably clear as well. That George R. R. Martin has said that, he's thought back to this, and actually probably he thinks that Valyrians should have been darker skinned. That would have worked better. So this actually fits in with what he was originally wanting. But in terms of Corlys Velaryon, we never get a description of Corlys Velaryon's skin color. And the in-world reason for this is that the Velaryons are a trading family. They move around by sea lots. They interact with lots of people, and they will have intermarried with the Summer Islanders at some stage, which I think is fine. So I think that for me, although I absolutely love your idea there, and that for me that's now sort of approaching headcanon. I love the idea that this is a magical aberration, but for me this doesn't need huge amounts of explanation. It's just okay, that's a casting choice. So thank you. I love the question, and I think that there is clearly a reasonable in-world explanation as well. Username redacted. Westworld. Why couldn't Rehoboam predict or counter Dolores? Okay, so Westworld. I watched this season of Westworld, not with the eye of a content creator, but just to enjoy it. I'm thinking this is a question back to season 3. I'm going to plead the fifth is the wrong way of saying this. I will come back and answer this one next week, because I would have to re-engage my brain with Rehoboam, which was a season 3 thing rather than a season 4 thing. I did enjoy it though. Howland's little sister. I am so excited to have these 2 shows starting. Me too. I'm sure both will have millions of fans. I have not read any of Tolkien's work, so my knowledge comes from the movies and your wonderful presentations. Thank you. I have a simple question. Please list the names of the types of characters. I always get confused with who are the top level beings. This is a Tolkien world thing. The next level and where the elves come in the sequence. The names are confusing me, and I struggle with who is who. So I think what we're talking about here is things like Maiar and Valar and things like that. So what we have is one god. There is one god in Tolkien's world, Eru, Ilúvatar, two names for the one god. And Eru created everything. So he's the creator god. There are he also created these beings. They were called the Ainur, who sung expressions of his creativity, and they each were given insight into part of his character, part of God. Now, some of these headed down, decided once everything had, they'd seen all of this creation that they'd sung into business. It's a longer story here. For Tolkien purists, I know I'm making this a very short version, but they went it down and were commissioned to manage it. That's the Valar. We have the Valar, these 14 godlike beings. They're basically a pantheon. Now, each of them have a different expression, different understanding of aspects of Eru. So we get some. We probably won't meet these individually within the Rings of Power, but for example, we have Ulmo, Lord of the Waters, his rule is over the seas. We get Yavanna, who's in charge of nature, trees and fields and things growing and all of that. And all of the Valar have these different aspects. So if you're thinking like a pantheon of gods that we have a number of different mythologies in this world, you're not far off. Morgoth, incidentally, he's at that kind of level. He's the most powerful of those, but he's the baddie. So he's like the equivalent of kind of Lucifer in Christian mythology. Underneath the Valar are the Maiar. Now, they basically help and serve the Valar, and they are also immortal, and they're also hugely powerful, but they're not at the same level as the Valar. The Maiar, you will know some of these because some of them come to Middle-earth. These are people like Gandalf, Saruman, Radagast, and Sauron. So they're the sort of the next level down. They are immortal. They are spiritual beings who can take on a physical form. This is why you get Gandalf. His body is killed, but he can come back because his spirit is immortal. Similarly, Sauron, his body gets killed several times, and then he can come back as a different body. So they're all of this kind of the top tier. Underneath that, we get what are called the children of Ilúvatar, elves and humans. Dwarves are a slightly different thing, but they're mortals. Elves are also immortal because elves are tied to Middle-earth, tied to the planet. So when they die in Middle-earth, they go to the halls of Mandos, and then they sort of come back in Valinor, and they're still there, so they can theoretically come back to Middle-earth again, as someone like Glorfindel does. So they are immortal, but they're on the same level, so to speak, as humans. Humans are mortal. Humans, men, us, they are not tied to this world. So when a human dies, they go somewhere else. Now, this is deemed by the Valar as a blessing. This is a great thing because they're not tied to this world. They can go off to a good place. But obviously, humans don't see it quite that way. They die. The elves are immortal. That doesn't seem fair. And this is going to be a cause of tension when we get into the Rings of Power, because humans will look at elves and go, well, how come they're immortal? We die. So that's where we're at. We've got Eru Ilúvatar at the top, big creator god of everything. Then we get the Valar, who are effectively a pantheon. They're not actually god, but they are acting as sort of regents effectively over the world. Then we got the Maiar, who are supporting them. Then you can kind of draw a line, and underneath that we get the children of Iluvatar, the elves, the humans, the dwarves, the hobbits descend from the humans, that kind of thing. You also asked about the world of George R. R. Martin. Could I clarify who Bloodraven is? Very happily. Is Bloodraven the character who got Bran to go to the north in the current story? No, he's not around at the time of the Dance of the Dragons. He will arrive a while later. He is the bastard son of Aegon the Fourth. So we see Aegon 2 and 3 will appear in this story, but not Aegon the Fourth. So he appears later. He's a character called Brynden Rivers. Aegon the Fourth had a lot of bastard children, and a lot of them were really quite exceptional. But he then is the character, Brynden Rivers. He gets known as Bloodraven, and he is the character who then goes off to become the Three-Eyed Crow. Kelly Johnson, will Jon Snow become Azor Ahai again in the spin-off? No, he shouldn't do, because hopefully the in the spin-off is based on the Game of Thrones world, and Azor Ahai is connected with destroying the threat from the White Walkers, and that has been dealt with in the Game of Thrones, the TV show. So no. Which is quite a straightforward answer on that one. Let's go to Andy Q with a question. Hi, Robert. Congratulations on 400,000. Thank you very much. I've always been curious about... Yes, I've reached 400,000 subscribers last week, I think. So thank you very much. I had a lot of people saying congratulations. Thank you to everyone. I've always been curious about the story of Princess Aeria. As there are a lot more Targaryens about in House of the Dragon, will we learn more about the mysteries of Valyria in this show? What do you think I never meant? I love the way George R. R. Martin creates such mysteries and leaves a lot to our imagination, but it would be interesting to learn more. So Princess Aeria is in the past when we've reached this show of House of the Dragon. She could have been queen herself. She was twice heir to the throne. And this is something that came through hugely in Fire and Blood, incidentally. If you've never read it, this was George R. R. Martin just showing us firsthand. If you think the promo stuff for House of the Dragon is pushing that they'll never allow a woman to sit on the Iron Throne, that comes direct from Fire and Blood, because it's painfully obvious all the way through Fire and Blood. First of all, we get Aegon the Conqueror's two sister wives who were joint ruling with him but not allowed to be the king. Then we get Alicent, who was Jaehaerys's wife, who basically co-ruled with him, but she was not counted as being the queen. Aeria was twice heir to the throne. Both times she was just completely ignored, and somebody else took the throne. The first time was Maegor. The second time was Jaehaerys. They just said, no, I don't care whether you're counted as being heir to the throne. I'm taking over now. So this happens again and again, and then we get Rhaenys, the queen who never was. Then we get Rhaenyra, who literally sat on the Iron Throne ruling for 6 months and then just got written out from history. No, you're not allowed to be in the line of rulers. Doesn't matter whether you were sitting on the Iron Throne ruling, you're not counted. So Aeria is fascinating. So she was Aenys's heir, and then Maegor made her his heir as well. There is a little bit of twin swapping around shenanigans going on there, but I will just keep on calling her Aeria because it's a lot simpler. She climbed onto the back of Balerion the Black Dread, who had been ridden previously by Maegor, and she climbs onto the back of him, and she's still young. She'd never ridden a dragon before. He was ancient and very difficult to control, and he just flew off somewhere. The clear implication is that he flew off to Valyria. She's gone for a long time. Then Balerion comes back, lands in the Red Keep. Something horrendous has happened. He's got huge gouges taken out of his side by who knows what. She's got a horrific it's almost horror the way that George R. R. Martin describes it, but she's been hugely affected and she dies very soon afterwards. And all she says is, I never... So the question is, what was she saying? I think it was just, I never meant to go to Valyria. I think it's probably that simple. And I think that she probably regretted it the moment that she got there. Will we, however, learn more about the mysteries of Valyria? I think we will. They seem to be setting up Daemon Targaryen as being a very Valyrian Targaryen, somebody who's upholding the traditions of Valyria. And this is an interesting little twist, because the Dance of the Dragons is a line in the Targaryens where we have knowledge and understanding of things that dies out after that, because so many Targaryens die, so many dragons die, and at this point they just lose a lot. So it appears that yes, we will have some more understanding of their Valyrian culture. Certainly we have people naming dragons after Valyrian gods. We had what looked like a Valyrian hand fasting ceremony with Daemon and Rhaenyra from the trailer. That should show us a little bit more, so I'm desperately hoping that we will. Chaos Ballerina. Matt Smith said Daemon doesn't want to be king, loves chaos, and just wants to make everyone angry. Is this a reinterpretation of the character, or does this have a basis in Fire and Blood? Also, loving Longboy Caraxes. Yeah, so the dragons are looking amazing. Absolutely agree with that. Is this a reinterpretation of Daemon? I don't think it's a reinterpretation. It is an interpretation. I think that enjoys chaos definitely is there. The wants to make everyone angry. I mean, that's an interpretation, but he's always the center of attention whatever he does. The doesn't want to be king thing is an interpretation, a clear interpretation, because the clear implication from Fire and Blood is that he wanted to be king. He thought he was next in line after his brother, because he thought Rhaenyra as a woman wouldn't inherit. And then from that point onwards, he was trying to get as close to power as he possibly could. That is the best way of interpreting, in my view, the best way of interpreting book Daemon is by, why is he doing these things? Because this is the best way to get him closest to power. Who's he siding with? He's siding with Rhaenyra. He's siding with Corlys. He's trying to marry this person. He's trying to kill that person. It's all to get as close to power as he can. That is the easiest and best way to interpret his character in the books. This idea that, and I did read the interview, he said that he'd had a discussion with the showrunners about this. Did he want to be king? Did he love his family? Was he just more about himself? And I like the fact that they had these discussions. I like the fact that they were thinking about this character, trying to work their way through it. This is an interpretation. The idea that he loves his family and does not want to be king, those are elements in Daemon, and the idea is that Daemon is a conflicted person. He does love his family, but I think he does also want to be as close to power as possible. So how that plays into Matt Smith's character is going to be fascinating, because this doesn't mean that it's going to be a bad interpretation. It might be a very, very good interpretation, but particularly when you play it in with how these other characters are going to be, because no adaptation from the book to screen is ever 100% exact. And if they've built up Viserys's character, which we know that they have, then that requires Daemon's character to shift slightly as well, because suddenly Viserys is no longer this two-dimensional character. He's got added layers. That means that Daemon has to react to those added layers, which will reveal more parts of who he is. So I'm okay with this. But yes, it is an interpretation of the character. Martin S. What could Numenor have achieved in Valinor militarily? It seems it was mostly an authority thing that Eru had to act because men were his children. Otherwise, how would the war go? I still believe in a costly Aman victory. So this is obviously going back to Lord of the Rings. The end game for Numenor, the height of human civilization, is they build this huge armada and then they go and attack the Undying Lands. They say, right, this is it. The Valar hate humans. They're not giving us, this is Sauron's behind all of this thinking, they're not giving us what we want, which is eternal life. They're hiding the secret of eternal life there in Valinor, in the Undying Lands. We're going to go and get it. A huge armada goes over. We read that the Valar basically look upwards and say, okay, Eru, this is up to you. Do you want to do something about this? And Eru takes over and he absolutely destroys the fleet, everyone who was there, and then he destroys Numenor itself, the entire island. So Eru intervenes. What if he hadn't? Could the army, the navy of the Numenorians have won? I don't think they could. The population of Aman at the time was still quite big. They had a lot of elves still lived over there, and we know that elves who have been living in the light of Aman are very strong, and so they. So, for example, we Galadriel, who is incredibly powerful. There are other people. Yes, she was noteworthy and powerful in Valinor, but not necessarily the most. So the elves were there, and also the Valar were there. And when you've got somebody who's got the powers over Manwë, the eagles respond to Manwë. He could just create more eagles and go and attack. This would not work. This would simply not work. They were always going to lose. This was them being duped by Sauron. So, I'm sure they would have caused some damage. But as you say, a costly Aman victory makes a whole load of sense. Asteroid Yeti. I know there are 5 known wizards, but can only remember 3. Saruman, Gandalf, Radagast. Who are the other 2? I do know that in the Unfinished Tales, he says that the total amount is unknown, though. Yeah, so there's 5. There are 2 blue wizards. This is another thing that Tolkien slightly shifted on. That it's possible, if you read between the lines, that there were more, but we know about 5, which is Saruman, Radagast, Gandalf, and the 2 blue wizards. The 2 blue wizards headed off to the east, and they were not heard from again. But basically, Tolkien says, they kind of like fell away from their original commission and failed. So that's where they are. But the intriguing thing is that certainly in one version of events that Tolkien writes, the blue wizards were there in the Second Age as well and doing a good job. So maybe we'll see them in the Rings of Power. Michael James, thank you very much for the super sticker. It's a little fox. Thank you very much for that. Let's go to Londuck20, question from one of my patrons. Hi, Robert. I appreciate you doing the open Q&A every now and then, as I have a ton of questions to ask, but they aren't always on topic. What happened to Robb and Greywind's bodies after the Red Wedding? Back to Song of Ice and Fire. I know they were mutilated, but were they then thrown into the river like Catelyn? It would be a shame if a king of the North was never able to be buried in the Winterfell crypts. Also, do you think that Sir Barristan knows that Roose Bolton wanted his throat slit after the Battle of the Trident? As for the second bit, Sir Barristan, I don't know whether he knew that, but he knew that there was a debate about what should happen with him, whether he should be spared or not, and he was probably expecting to be killed. This was a rebellion, and he had been fighting on behalf of the Mad King. He was probably expecting to be killed and was surprised not to be. So I don't think it would surprise him in the slightest if he didn't know that Roose Bolton wanted him to, that Roose Bolton did call for it. So that's that bit. In terms of Robb Stark's body and Greywind's body, the short answer is we're not told. George R. Martin does not say what happens. Now, there is a possibility that Robb Stark's head was sent to King's Landing. And the reason I say that is that Joffrey says this a lot. He says, I'm going to give you your brother's head as a present. And that seems to, if everybody knew that, then of course they would have sent Robb Stark's head there. And they did take off his head because they replaced it with the wolf head. So that maybe, that's just speculating, maybe that made its way down to King's Landing, and then someone like, say, Tyrion just prevented that from happening because it was just a bit too grisly. So what could have happened? Could they have been thrown in like Catelyn was thrown into the river? My guess is no. Catelyn was thrown into the river as a mockery of Tully burial rites. That's what was going on there. The Tullys, the dead get pushed out into the river, and so they killed her and just dumped her body into the river as a kind of a mockery of the Tullys. If they were going to do a mockery of the Stark burial rites, then what would they do? Well, I don't know. Would they burn his bones? Something like that? It's entirely possible. My general take is that we're not going to see this again. I think that the point is that Robb Stark's now not going. It is a tragedy, but he's not going to be back. His bones are not going to return to Winterfell. So yeah, I think it's sad, but I think that is just it, and we just probably will never actually know. Beesman, thank you very much for commenting. You were the first person to click on the join button, and I'm delighted to see that what I was hoping was going to happen did indeed happen. And when looking in the chat, you've got a little star next to your name, so that makes people who join the members club, your questions will stand out. So hopefully this means that it's easier for me to spot what you say. You say here, you are my favorites. This is picking up about what might have been what Sauron has been saying. You're my favorites and can't have that. Build a boat and I will Atlantis your whole civilization. Yep, the biblical god is showing with Eru Iluvatar. Yes, so this is what Eru Iluvatar is. The destruction, I mean, this is something that I've thought of a lot. The destruction of Numenor with just the faithful surviving on boats is very reminiscent of the Noah story. John, thank you very much. Saying, hey, Robert, thank you for all you do. You're very welcome. Are the 3 books of lore that Bilbo gives Frodo in the Many Partings chapter of Return of the King the Silmarillion? Well, this is bits of the Red Book of West March. This is what he's been writing in his translations from things that are in Rivendell. So the short answer is partly yes. This is the sort of, again, this is the in-world conceit, is that these are things that Tolkien the Professor has uncovered. The Red Book of West March is these stories that we have handed down to us and these legends from the elves, and this is why the Silmarillion is basically written from the elves' perspective. and this is passed on down via Bilbo. Yes. Question from Mara Lee. I know the focus of this show, House of the Dragon, will be to tell the story of the dance. Do you think if the show becomes successful, other stories from Fire and Blood may also then be told, like Aegon's Conquest? Yeah, absolutely. I think Aegon's Conquest will be the next one that they do after this. Catherine Furseth. Hi, Robert. Thanks for getting up our excitement for these shows. You're welcome. Hot D is setting out to be a story about the Dance of the Dragons or the Targaryen dynasty, which made me think on a sort of meta level about the whole history of Westeros. Sorry in advance for possible rambling of thoughts, not rambling at all, no apology needed, but A Song of Ice and Fire is just that, a story of the relationship between ice and fire, a relationship and a history going back millennia long before the Targaryens. I regard this story as having the scope of all of Westerosi history, I would agree. The others being and representing ice, what represented fire before the dragons came at a much later date. During the first long night, did fire exist, or was ice just an older threat? And then fire as a threat came much later. Does any of this make sense? Thanks as always. It does make sense. Yes. So, and at a meta level, I absolutely agree. So this is about ice and fire. Now, obviously, dragons represent fire. The stories we have of the first long night are about ice, obviously with the others. And how were they defeated? Well, we get the last hero who goes and meets up with the children of the forest, and he gets dragonglass from them. And then we have Azor Ahai. Azor Ahai is a fascinating legend because we've not actually been told the legend of Azor Ahai. We've been told the legend of the forging of Lightbringer, which is his sword. And the whole point of that is he gets a fiery sword. And the implication is he then uses that to go off and win the day, end the long night, defeat the others. We're not told exactly how, but that's the clear implication. And this means that the weapon that he uses is fire. Now, all of these are legends, so perhaps weapon is just it's kind of a symbolic language. Maybe the answer is that the thing that was used to defeat the others was fire. So yes, it's there. The other thing that I would point out, which is A Song of Ice and Fire, is that the key to this, and also we get when we're talking about the last hero, dragonglass. Dragonglass is frozen fire. Dragonglass represents the midpoint, or between fire and ice, or probably more accurately, both together in one thing. And when we at our story in A Song of Ice and Fire, dragonglass is often used in association with Jon. Also, the ice dragon is used in association with Jon to show that he is both ice and fire. He's the balance, he's the center point. But dragonglass was there from the very beginning as well, and clearly has an important role in defeating the others because it is fire and ice. Karis Ballerina saying, why do you think none of the House of the Dragon screenings have had the opening credits? I did not know that. If I had to speculate, it would be that they decided that they want the credits to be new for everybody when they see them, just holding something back. 2, is the burning of Shireen based on Iphigenia? If so, will someone get revenge for her? That Karis Ballerina, you're incredibly well read, and so I think some of your questions I do have to go and check back. This is the second thing I think I have to come back next week, so apologies. But I will come back to you on that one. And thirdly, will it be Queen or Lady Sansa? Well, she will be Lady Sansa, definitely. This is the case. Will she be Queen? I mean, it makes sense. Obviously, she was in the TV show. The the question is, will the seven... Well, there's a number of questions here. At the end of all of this, will the seven kingdoms be brought back together again as seven kingdoms, or will the North remain separate? Because if the North remains separate, then it does need a king or queen, assuming they're not completely changing their mode of government. If that's the case, then who is it? Well, let's assume it's the Starks. Bran, if we're working on the assumption Bran is going to be king of the seven kingdoms or six kingdoms or whatever it is, then he's not going to be king of the North, king in Winterfell. Jon is definitely not going to do it. I'm absolutely sure he's going to be heading north at the end of all of this. Arya won't want to be queen. Rickon's almost certainly going to be dead, which leaves just one Stark, Sansa. So if the North remains independent, then she will be queen, is my short answer to that question. Will the North remain independent? Probably is as good as I get. She will definitely be a lady. Whether she will also be queen, it's a probably. Martin S. Are the Falmari Aman Teleri weaker than the other two groups of Aman elves, the Vanyar and the Noldor? I get that impression. Yeah, I get that impression as well. So for those who are not aware of this detail, when the elves first arrived in Middle-earth way back in the sort of early days in Middle-earth, before even the First Age, then they basically get summoned or invited to go to Valinor, to this wonderful place where the Valar live. The two trees are there. It's all light and bright and beautiful and wonderful. And the elves sort of set off, but then some of them decide, you know what, I don't want to go. Some of them head off on this long journey and sort of stop off part way and then stay there. So that's why there are some elves who never went all the way over there. Some head off straight away and just love it. The Teleri, they hung around for a little bit, and then they arrived later, and then they grew to love the sea, and then basically decided to just stay a little bit offshore on an island. Now, what does this make them slightly less powerful? Well, the two trees, the lights of the trees made people stronger. This much we know. And the further away from it, the clear implication is that the less impact it would have. So logically, yes, it makes sense that they are slightly less, slightly more weak than the people who are basking in the light of the two trees all the time. But and also, given what happened with the kinslaying of Alqualunde, then they lost. The Teleri lost to the Noldor in the only battle that we know of between those two groups, which seems to imply that the Noldor were stronger. So, yeah, that's the clear implication is yes. I don't think it's a huge thing, but that's the implication of what we've been told. John Seriani saying, hi Robert, congratulations on 400k. Thank you. I'm very excited to watch both the shows. My question pertains a bit to your video a while ago about George R. R. Martin's references to Tolkien in his writing. You detailed many small references in a specific chapter, like names and settings, and I am curious about some larger similarities as well. I have heard you mention that the Iron Throne is symbolically the same as the One Ring, and that also Jon Snow is akin to a mix of Aragorn and Frodo. Are there any other large similarities, i.e. Aegon the Conqueror, less evil version of Sauron, the other wizards, the Maesters, not supposed to rule but advise? Thank you. So that's a video. That was a collaboration with History of Westeros, looking at there is a specific chapter in, I'm trying to remember it, I think it was Storm of Swords, where Bran and co are at the Night Fort, and the echoes from that across to the Fellowship getting through the or just outside Moria, the echoes and going through Moria are huge. They're all the way through, right through, people dropping things down wells, people being stabbed with spears, but having I thought you were dead. No, I've got some chainmail under here. All of this, the echoes are very, very deliberate all the way through. This is clearly an homage from George R. R. Martin to Tolkien. The bigger things that you mentioned there, about the Iron Throne symbolically the same as the One Ring, as an emblem and symbol of power, absolutely, and how power corrupts. That is very clear in my mind. And Jon Snow, I mean, this is my pithy summary of Jon Snow, which I've said before. Jon Snow, George R. R. Martin is writing him as if he was Aragorn, the returning king who's been hidden away in secret, but in reality he's more like Frodo, the character, the long-suffering character who at the end of all of this is going to be so broken by his contribution that he just has to leave. So that's the where the sort of Aragorn and Frodo thing is. I think in terms of other kind of influences, they're more sort of meta so far. There are a whole load of small ones that he does, but the larger ones, I think that there's definitely something about nature / environmentalism which is here. We know Tolkien loved trees and nature. I think George R. R. Martin, not in as overt a way, but what we will find, I think, is that the Weirwood tree network, the Children of the Forest, representing the earth, the continent, as it were, they will be shown to be victorious ultimately. So that, I think, is one of the things. And also this kind of magic is waning, and the age of intellectual debate is in the future. That is a feel which we've got in, not just in Middle Earth, as clearly magic wanes over the Third Age to a point where in the Fourth Age this is the dominion of man. When we've got Westeros, magic had waned, is now coming back. If the dragons die, it will wane once more. Vicky Santos, hi Robert, long time lurker here with a question that's been on my mind for a while. Well, welcome. I know you've been lurking, but it's fantastic if you're asking questions. Is Pycelle so loyal to Tywin because he's a Lannister by birth? This is something that people have speculated on for quite some time. He is clearly loyal to the Lannisters. This doesn't just appear to be a thing that since he's been Grand Maester, he's been given a few coins here and there. This does seem to be something deep rooted. And the thing about the Maesters is they give up their surname, so we simply do not know. But Pycelle he could very well be related to the Lannisters. That is if you go through sort of the Tolkien, George R. R. Martin forums and ancient thoughts on this, because this idea has been around a long time, then yes, that is probably the accepted wisdom. Casper Arena, just Iphigenia is sacrificed by her father for good sailing weather in the Iliad, and this is connected in with your question earlier. Is the burning of Shireen based on that? If so, will someone get revenge for her? It could well be based on that. It definitely is for weather. I'm absolutely convinced of it. As I say, I don't think people can move around in the north without some bit of weather magic, and she will be the sacrifice that will do it. Is someone going to get revenge for her? Well, it's a whole world of itself. How do we interpret the TV show, and how that might impact on the books? But clearly, Davos was the person who was going to try and get revenge for her. And then eventually, at the end of it, he just watched Melisandre die. Is that going to happen in the books? I think Davos, he won't be there when this happens. And when he finds out, he will want to get revenge on her, but perhaps will not be able to. I don't think it'll come out exactly the same, but I think that, yes, there will be people who want to get revenge on Melisandre. But her role, I think, will take her right through towards the end, if not actually at the end. I think that's me caught up in the chat. So let's go to some questions from my patrons. Catherine Furseth, Middle-earth, Second Age question. Why was the world shaped into a sphere? Was it simply to protect the continent of Aman and Valinor? And why were elves deemed worthy of entering it still through the straight road? Do you think the Rings of Power series will show this? Okay, so the world was changed into a sphere in one of the versions of Tolkien. Tolkien wrote another version where the world was always a sphere, but the version that we have in the Silmarillion, the world started out as flat, but then at the end of the Second Age, it got turned into a sphere. Destruction of Numenor, and this prevented humans from ever again trying to get to Valinor. And that appears to be, it's not spelt out exactly like that. I think Tolkien did pick up on it in his letters, but that does appear to be the main reason, to prevent people getting to Valinor. The elves could still get to Valinor by going the straight path. This is where we get to Círdan the shipwright, and if you think at the very end of the Lord of the Rings, when they get into the boat and they're sailing to Valinor, it's like the idea is that if you get on a boat normally and then sail, then you're sort of going curved like that, but somehow the elves can go from the Círdan's ships can go on a straight path, which takes them to a different destination, as if the world were still flat and they could still get to Valinor. Why were the elves allowed to do that? Well, this is because they are, unlike humans who, when they die, they're no longer attached to this world, they go somewhere else. Elves are attached. They have to stay here. They have to go. They're called to Valinor, and when they die, when they grow weary of Middle-earth, they head there. This is their place. I did a video not too long ago about the ban of the Valar, about this, the Valar saying to Numenorians, you're not allowed to come to Valinor. And the logic here is not actually, I mean, humans would disagree with this, but the logic here is not actually, we don't want you to have eternal life. That's what humans seem to think it is. But it's that that's not for them. That's not their place. Their place is Middle-earth. Humanity belongs on Middle-earth. The seasons change. Kingdoms rise and fall. People live their lives fast compared to elves. This is the right environment for them. That wearies elves. It's actually not right for elves. Elves grow weary in Middle-earth because things are just keep on changing and changing and changing and changing. And elves, long-lived, they need stability. They need things to stay the same. The Undying Lands, Valinor, that's where things stay the same. Time just stretches out. This is where elves are at home. And Tolkien writes in an essay about this, and he says if a human did get to Valinor, then it's not like they would suddenly die, but it would just be wrong for them. They would not work. They would just see maybe 2 seasons. Their life would be to the world around them, which was moving at this incredibly graceful, slow speed. It would just be like a mayfly. They would like that, and they'd be gone. And it just wouldn't be right for them. So this is not treated as like a ban to try and prevent humans there, because we don't want humans there. Elves are worthy, humans are not. It's that it's the right place for elves. Middle Earth is the right place for humans. That's the logic. Kelly Johnson saying the shepherd freed Westeros from Targaryen tyranny. Targaryen tyranny. You know what I mean. It's getting too late for tongue twisters. Targaryen tyranny. Yes, in a way. So the shepherd incited people to attack the dragon pit and destroy the 5 dragons that were there, kill the dragons, and the end of the dragons meant the end of the Targaryen rule by dragons. That meant that they no longer had to they were no longer there ruling by threat of burning people to death. They now had to rule by politics as much as anything else. Ryan Larkin, thank you very much for the super sticker there with a cup of tea or something, I think that is. Thank you. Martin S. saying some are impressed by how Fingolfin challenged the most powerful being in the universe, discounting Eru. However, I think Morgoth at that point was far below his maximum point and below other Valar. So this is Fingolfin, who was one of the Noldorin elves, king of the Noldorin elves at one point, and he fought Morgoth, and he did a really good job. He nearly did it. He cut him, he made him bleed, and he basically Morgoth then after that he retreated back into his lair and never came out again. But Fingolfin died. So I'm impressed because Morgoth even at weak power he's the most powerful of the Valar, and even at weak power, then he's steps of power above Fingolfin. So the fact that Fingolfin could stand was pretty impressive. But yeah, I mean there are always extenuating circumstances, and Feanor, we're told by Tolkien, Feanor could probably have defeated Morgoth with his army if he had gone there at that point, because the light of the 2 trees was still strong within him. Vanderlee Jr. saying Fingolfin is one of the bravest characters in my opinion. Yes, the bravery is definitely there, regardless of whether you think that he was at his strongest and Morgoth was at his weakest. The bravery was definitely there. Dan McKay, in addition to the destruction of Numenor, when else has Eru Ilúvatar openly intervened in the affairs of Arda? Did elves and men pray to Eru Ilúvatar? And if so, at what times in history? Did they pray also to the other Valar, like ancient Greeks praying to various gods with one god king of the other gods? Did the Valar and Maiar see Eru Ilúvatar as their god creator? Yes, the Valar and Maiar did see Eru as their god and creator. They understood all that. They were there when it was created. They were created. So actual prayer and worship of Eru is quite rare within Middle-earth, though. We see it, I described in Numenor, when they go to the top of Mount Meneltama, they worship 3 times a year. So it does happen, but that's the elves and that's the Numenorians. When they were close to the elves, most normal humans, no. Did Eru ever intervene directly? On a few occasions, he did. On a few occasions, the Valar just sort of said, or Manwë just said, I'm now handing this over to you. But there are also a couple of times, this is really intriguing, where in the story of The Lord of the Rings, we see what appears to be Eru himself intervening in a way. Bringing Gandalf back, it appears, was Eru himself doing that. And then there are moments when Gandalf, he kind of like just basically says there's a higher power guiding this. He talks about when Bilbo picked up the ring, and he just sort of says, this is, he doesn't use these words, but he says, that's just freakishly good luck that Bilbo should be there, pick up the ring of power, that he should be there with me, and I know who he is, and then it came to you. That's just ridiculous. And Gandalf basically gets saying he was meant to. There's a higher power working on this, and if he was meant to, then so are you, Frodo, and that is a comforting thought. So he is very aware that there are moments when it's like Eru intervened. There are hints that he intervened right at the very end with the ring as well. But yes, Eru is there when the worlds are changed, when things are destroyed, when Beleriand is destroyed at the end, when they have to decide what to do with Morgoth. These kinds of things, they just hand it over when at the end of the Second Age, Numenor attacks. Manwë just says, right, this is above my pay grade. Eru, could you do whatever you want to do here? Another question from Dan McKay. Where is Sauron now after the destruction of the One Ring by Frodo and Gollum? Wherever he is, why can he not return to Middle-earth again? For that matter, where is Morgoth, and why can't he as well? So this is an interesting one, because Maiar, like Sauron, are eternal spiritual beings. It's their bodies that can die, but then their spirit lives on. So does that mean that Sauron is still alive and is just going to come back in another body? Well, this Morgoth is chained in the void. So that's what happened with Morgoth. But Sauron, we know he was killed. His body was destroyed when Numenor was destroyed. His body was destroyed when the ring was cut from his finger by Isildur. So is this any different when he's destroyed when the One Ring was destroyed? This is what it says. This is what they see in The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King. It seemed to them that black against the pall of cloud there rose a huge shape of shadow. This is when the ring is cast into the cracks of doom. There rose a huge shape of shadow, impenetrable, lightning-crowned, filling all the sky. Enormous, it reared above the world and stretched out towards them a vast, threatening hand, terrible but impotent. For even as it leaned over them, a great wind took it, and it was all blown away and passed, and then a hush fell. So that's what happens to Sauron. His spirit, yes, his body may have been destroyed once more, but his spirit kind of rears up, and it's just there reaching out this kind of dark hand towards them, but then a wind, again, Eru, it would appear, himself intervening, or perhaps Manwë, blowing the spirit away. The difference here with the destruction of the ring to when Sauron's body was destroyed is that the Sauron poured so much of himself into that ring that as long as the ring survived, he would survive. But when the ring died, he would not be able to take on bodily form once more. Now, the best way to kind of explain this is to say that it's the equivalent of putting on a set of clothes. When you're a spiritual being, a Maya, your spiritual being taking on a physical form, you're putting on a set of clothes. What Sauron did effectively poured everything of of himself, so much of himself, into the One Ring that when that was destroyed, it was like destroying the clothes. And so there were no clothes left. He could no longer take on physical form. And the wind blew his spirit away. So is he still out there somewhere? Yes. But impotent is the word that is there. He can't do anything. He can't take on physical form. He cannot influence events again. He's just existing. As a sort of a follow-up to that, you would also ask, if Sauron's body was destroyed along with Numenor, which it was, does that mean that the One Ring was not with him on Numenor when the island was destroyed? Was it hidden in Mordor waiting for his return, or did Numenor go down before the One Ring was forged? Well, the One Ring was forged and did exist at that time. But whether Sauron had it with him in Numenor is one of these things again we have with Tolkien, where he did seem to slightly change his mind on this, because as we've seen for this bit here, the body got destroyed and the spirit could survive, and so what we have in the background here is that the spirit returned back to Mordor from Numenor. The implication, therefore, has to be that the ring was back in Mordor. But then Tolkien talked about him having the ring in Numenor, and he was asked about this. And someone wrote him a letter, and he did reply in a kind of like, you kind of read between the lines a little bit. It's almost as I didn't really think that through. I have to try and figure out something out. And he came out with a quick, what comes across as quite a glib kind of responses, that Sauron's spirit took the ring back with him, which, okay, fine. It was magic answer. But whether it was on Numenor or not, it survived. And Sauron's spirit survived, and he could reincorporate himself. The way, if I were to work my way through this, I would come to something like his body was destroyed by this, but his spirit had still had the capacity to become corporeal, to take on a bodily form. And it had enough energy within itself that it could, while in spiritual form, carry a small item like a ring across to Mordor. That would be how I would square that circle. Martin S. saying Fingolfin's deed is indeed very impressive. It's still very impressive. Don't misunderstand me. I don't misunderstand you at all. Yes, it is very impressive. But and I take your point that perhaps it's not as impressive as some people think, but it is very impressive. Kartik Prabhu, thank you very much for picking up for Eric Eastman. That's very kind of you. What does Eru Ilúvatar keep? Why does Eru Ilúvatar keep Morgoth alive and chained instead of outright destroying him like he did to the Númenóreans? Or would destroying a Valar be like destroying a part of himself? Interesting question. For his own ineffable reasons is the unhelpful answer. But looking forward in time, this is a bit like in Christian theology, why didn't God just kill Satan? Because Satan had a role to play is the answer within Christian theology. I'm sure there'll be theologians out there who will be able to write in the chat that it's not that simple. I'm sure it's not that simple, but bear with me. Morgoth, according to legends of what will happen in the battle at the end of time, Dagarath, there are elf stories about what will happen at the end of time. Morgoth will return and will finally be defeated, and at that point we're going to have the equivalent of new heaven and new earth, and the two trees are going to come back again, and everything's going to be great and good. So he still has a role to play is the sort of the answer. And he, incidentally, and again, this is something I will do a video on at some point, Tolkien wrote quite extensively about Morgoth and how he kept his influence. The same way that Sauron forged a One Ring and pushed himself and his malign influence into that One Ring. He got that idea from Morgoth, who, there's the book called Morgoth's Ring. Morgoth's Ring is Middle-earth. He pushed a lot of himself into Middle-earth. He he imbued the world with a lot of who he is, meaning that evil would never be truly defeated so long as Middle-earth is there. A new shadow will always sprout up. A new branch of a tree, of an evil tree, will come sprouting up. You cannot rid Middle-earth of evil forever. That is Morgoth's ring. Middle-earth itself, the planet itself is. And so he could not be truly destroyed unless the planet itself was truly destroyed. And the planet itself was not destroyed until the end of time in this kind of Ragnarok kind of story. So there are a few levels to this. He still had a role to play, and he was tied to the creation because of he had created this ring. Two more questions from my patrons. So if you've got any more questions in the chat, now is the time to drop them in there. Eric Burden saying, "Hi Robert, always wondered if in A Song of Ice and Fire, some of the great houses have been around for 1,000 years. What happened to all of the extended families? We hear that the Karstarks might have been Starks a long time ago, and we hear of a few Lannister cousins, but otherwise we never really hear of any offshoots of the great houses. But one would assume there would be a lot of offshoots of the families running around after this long. The North should be full of offshoot Stark families. Do they lose the right to call themselves that? Starks, Lannisters, Tullys, etc. after some generations?" Well, this is a really interesting question. There are a lot of cadet branches out there. We don't read about. They certainly didn't appear on the TV show. We don't read about them hugely, but it becomes apparent that there are. The Lannisters have them. The Danes have them. The Starks have them. They're all over the place. These kind of cadet branches. Do they lose their name after a while? Perhaps they do. So what was interesting, and we've not really seen this, but we get a lot of the Lannister plan for the Riverlands was to, after they've destroyed it and occupied it, marry in members of the Lannister family to the family, the ruling families there. So all of them are connected in with the Lannisters. Now, do they take? This doesn't stick. But if we rolled it forward, would they keep the name of those houses? Well, yeah, perhaps they would. Perhaps if you married into the family of an ancient house, maybe you would take on the name of that house yourself to show that you're the new lord. That would certainly make sense if it worked out that way. I understand the logic of this. Yes, there should be lots and lots of them. George R. R. Martin has simplified this, but I think that there are in-world explanations for it. Kelly Johnson, will the show explore the Hightowers' Great Empire of the Dawn origins? I don't think they'll go quite that far back with House Hightower. I have a feeling that we're not going to get huge amounts of House Hightower history here. We're not going to spend much time in Old Town. We shouldn't spend much time in Old Town. Mara Lee, rounding up questions from my patrons, saying, besides House of the Dragon and the Rings of Power, what other shows do you think you may cover in the next few months? Are there any updates that you have heard of regarding The Witcher and the Wheel of Time? Well, yes, the Wheel of Time season 2 has finished filming. We've not been told when it's going to air. If I had to guess, then it would be at some point after the Rings of Power. The slot that they're using for the Rings of Power is broadly the same slot that they were using for the Wheel of Time. So it makes sense that they might want to follow on one after the other. Now, it also kind of fits there. If we've got 8 weeks of the Wheel of Time, 8 episodes, then they would be able to fit that in just before Christmas. So that kind of makes sense. I think that's where we're at. The Wheel of Time season 3 has been renewed, so they're going to start filming that one soon as well. As for The Witcher, Season 3, they're nearly at the end of filming that. They had a little bit of delay. Henry Cavill unfortunately got COVID. He's absolutely fine, but that meant that he couldn't be involved for a couple of weeks, slowed everything down. But I think they've only lost a couple of weeks of that. So that's going to be finishing filming soon. Now, in the previous 2 seasons, they've managed to turn around post-production in 7 months. So if we're saying beginning of September that this is, and that's going to be October, November, December, January, February, March, April. So that's when we're looking at. This means that season 3 is going to miss the previous traditional slot of just around Christmas time for The Witcher, but expect it at some point in the spring. We have, however, potentially got one other Witcher thing that will be around at Christmas, which is Blood Origin. Blood Origin has not had a happy production, it has to be said. For those who've missed this, Blood Origin is a prequel mini-series, which was 6 episodes starring Michelle Yeoh. They produced way back in, I think, November last year. We had a trailer for it, and then since then it's rumbled on and it's not been released. And it had some extensive reshoots with a completely new director. We've had rumors that they're changing the number of episodes. We've had rumors that they're adding in extra bits to it to try and make it more intelligible for the viewer. I've heard reports that it might now not even be ready for Christmas, which is a very long wait for something that they finished filming about a year ago. So I don't know where that's got to, and I don't know what it's going to be like when it arrives, but it's not had the happiest of production cycles. This, I think, is going to be a bit annoying for the Netflix, who had, well, very annoying for Netflix, who had plans for launching the Witcherverse, a much broader, not just the main Witcher story. We've already had Nightmare of the Wolf, the anime. They have a few other things being planned, but this was the first big offshoot from it, and that doesn't appear to be working very well. In terms of other shows that I might cover in the next few months, it's mostly just these 2 working my way up to Christmas. At Christmas, as I said, I'm going to have a proper think about what I might cover going forward. Definitely, obviously, going to be carrying on covering both of these shows, but what else I might cover, I'll have a look and see what else is out there. Do let me know in the comments below if there's anything that you would love this channel to be covering in the future. If I get more capacity, then who knows? The sky's the limit. Question from Caius Ballerina. Do the lesser rings just make their wearers invisible? Since Gandalf originally thinks the One Ring is a lesser ring, I assume at least some of them did this, or send their wearers into the Wraith world. Well, they had a lot of different uses, and Gandalf does seem to originally think that this is one of the lesser rings. This is the trial runs, it would appear, that Anatar and Celebrimbor did before forging the Rings of Power. Gandalf says that they must not be trifled with, and he does sort of try and work out whether or not this does more than just make you invisible. So he's concerned. Even when he thinks this is just a lesser ring, he is concerned, and he does check in on Bilbo, and it's only later that he starts to think that this is perhaps the One Ring. So do they all make people invisible? Not necessarily. We're not told huge amounts about them, to be honest, and that doesn't appear to be the case, certainly for the greater rings, the 3 elven rings. They have the ability to hide from the One Ring, and obviously the wraiths became invisible. The ring wraiths became invisible. The dwarven rings didn't seem to have that impact, so this doesn't seem to be affecting things hugely. But this concept of visibility does seem to be a themes. So it would make sense if at least some of them have some kind of invisibility thing going on. Beastman, thank you very much. Picking up a question for Time Lord Boy, saying, did Tolkien ever say where the hobbits came from? And then you followed it up saying, I think they just evolved from humans. So he, again, this is the Tolkien's way of doing this, is by putting himself into the story, saying that he's trying to figure these things out. That's what he says. He thinks that they did evolve from humans at some point in history. The earliest that we know about hobbit type people were there in the Vale of Anduin, but then they kind of migrated across the Misty Mountains when the shadow started growing in the Third Age. Sauron was based in Dol Guldur in South Mirkwood. But yes, the idea is that then they're not new created beings as hobbits. They evolved from humans, is basically what Tolkien says. Kelly Johnson saying, could the true history be found in Old Geese ruins? Lots of things can be found in ancient ruins. I don't think we're going to be going to Old Geese in the books, though. Okay, let's go to a few questions in the chat. Zebra Up saying, does anyone think Patrick Rothfuss will ever finish the Kingkiller trilogy? This is, for those who are unaware, the Kingkiller trilogy. Patrick Rothfuss, he's been, I think I'm right in saying this is the wait for this third book is even longer than the wait for the Winds of Winter. It's been a long time. He happily admits that he has issues with writer's block. He does a lot of good work on the side. His fans are very understanding, but still, it is a very long wait. I've not heard an update from that recently, but I don't know. Here's hoping. Kelly Summers, why was Bilbo invisible to Gandalf while wearing the ring? Well, the One Ring is the most powerful magic object in the entirety of Middle-earth, so that's how it is. Gandalf, because he's wearing the ring, that ring of power, does not necessarily mean that he can see he can see past the One Ring's defenses. Martin S. I think what Fingolfin was the greatest combat feat by any elf in the Legendarium, no doubt. I just think it would never work against a being who competed with 13 Valar by himself. Yes, I agree with you there. That absolutely is a useful clarification of that point. So Fingolfin, and indeed, if you were to try and write a list of the greatest fighters and warriors in Middle-earth history, you would have to put Fingolfin right up there, because he did stand toe-to-toe with Morgoth. But Morgoth, against the Valar, for eons, they were fighting and neither side could win. One of him against, as you say, against 13 Valar, until Tulkas arrived, the Laughing Warrior, who came in and tipped the balance. But yes, he was hugely strong. Philip, in the final episode of Game of Thrones, it's clear that Robin has experienced a glow-up. Robin Arryn, this is. Did George R. R. Martin share this plot point with Dan and Dave, or is this just a show invention? How might this glow-up impact the remaining 2 books? Right, so I don't know whether it's a show invention or just that the actor grew up a bit and looked a bit better. Now, will this impact on what happens? But it won't impact on what happens in the books. I don't think this information came from George R. R. Martin. George R. R. Martin has now increasingly been saying he was involved in the first 4 seasons. For those who are wondering what is he now saying about his involvement in Game of Thrones? The first 4 seasons he was involved. He wasn't a showrunner. He wasn't in charge of it. He wrote an episode each season and they talked to him. Then they had a big handover meeting, and he told them all of his plans. And then seasons 5 and 6, he was kept in the loop on most things, not everything. There were a couple of things that he was not in the loop on, but he was sort of kept in the loop. Seasons 7 and 8, he's now very clear he was not involved in at all. That's nothing. Season 7 and 8 is nothing to do with George R.R. Martin. The extent to which it was to do with George R.R. Martin is the extent to which he told them things in that handover meeting, which we weren't at, so we don't know what was said. But he told them things in that handover meeting that they then put in the show. That is as far as it is. So what Robin Arryn, who is not a central character, he's an important supporting character, but he's not a central character. What happens with Robin Arryn on the show is nothing to do with what's going to happen in the books. Time Lord Boy, did Tolkien ever say where the dragons went in Middle Earth? Yeah, to the northeast, to the Blasted Heath and the Grey Mountains. Question Joey Ebbs saying, I still can't believe they just ended The Night King in one episode. Yeah, I mean, it was quite an epic length episode, but yes, pretty much. Kelly Summers, did the One Ring actually make you invisible? I thought it was about moving in and out of the spirit realm. Tom and the Nazgul could see Frodo, and he could see spiritual beings like Glorfindel. It did make you invisible. The Nazgul operated in the spiritual realm, so they could see him there. It did, and it took you into the spiritual realm. Tom Bombadil is an exception to every rule, so I shouldn't worry too much about what the implications of Tom Bombadil. He happily did magic tricks with the One Ring, making it disappear and putting it on, and it didn't make him invisible, and that was noteworthy. Andrew Kay saying, I have been a long time Daemon defender, has his negatives, but is very grey to me. And clearly George R.R. Martin's favourite Targaryen is not a pure maniac, as some accuse him of being. Yes, so the description is very clear. He is both loved and reviled, both great and terrible. He is not a single character that you can say he's all this or all that. He's lots of different things at the same time. So he's going to be great fun. I'm absolutely sure of that. As a character, he's going to be a great fun. Okay, so let's just get on to remind people about what it is we've got coming up on the channel. On Sunday, it's the House of the Dragon premiere coming up. The first episode is happening. We're going to have a pre-show live stream here. At the same time this live stream started, I'll keep my live streams at the same time as I always do, 5 p.m. Eastern time, 10 o'clock UK time. So we can have a live stream, then a little break, and everyone can watch House of the Dragon after that. I will have another open Q&A again next Thursday, because we've got a week or so before we get into the regular routine of House of the Dragon live stream on Sunday, and then these Thursday live streams will turn into Rings of Power ones, pre-show live streams. So that's what's coming up. Tomorrow I've got my House of the Dragon in sort of introduction video, and that starts my House of the Dragon coverage. It will be as full of coverage as I can possibly manage without killing myself. I'm really looking forward to this. I'm very excited about the show. It looks absolutely amazing. So thank you very much to everyone in the chat. Oh, I've got a Kelly Johnson saying the show will explore Aegon's reasons for the conquest. Yes, it will, absolutely. Thank you for the fantastic questions this time around. Moderators, thank you. You are absolutely amazing. Patrons, thank you. You are absolutely amazing. I will see everybody on Sunday at 5 p.m. Eastern time. Take care.